I think we're probably ready to get started. So, well, thanks for joining us. And so the main reason that I wanted to have this conversation is because we've been doing this physics project. The physics project is a big surprise at how far it's managed to get in physics. And not satisfied with having managed to make great progress in physics, we're trying to understand how the formalism that we've developed for physics might apply to other things. And one of the other things that we think it might apply to is economics. And we're not sure if we know what we're talking about. And I figure you're a good person to tell us if we know what we're talking about. And we're not finished with trying to figure this out. But I guess one thing, I mean, I know you and I have talked before about, economics is not really a scientific kind of thing. And somehow I'm trying to understand, I view there as being some kind of Talebian economics, because by the time there's a big book that is full of wonderful formulas and things, this is a whole giant technical tower that seems to be based on, yes, go ahead.
This is not the book. The book is the next volume. This is like to get fat tails out of the way, which is not really the central point.
Okay.
So my if I were to define, I mean, my work was maybe not my work. It's my application, my own versions of work done elsewhere, maybe in the real world, is the following: is you're missing a layer of dimensionality in economics. So, for example, you take any equation, an equation that has sigma, all right, volatility, okay, and you tell yourself, what if that parameter is right on average, but is variable? So you have Jensen's inequalities effect. So the function of an average is not an average of a function. So it all comes from that, by saying I'm adding a layer of stochasticity to things. So it all started when I started doing, and I remember I was programming in Mathematica the option formula, and I figured out the following trick. It's a very simple trick. Okay, you take a Black-Scholes, you price the option at 10% higher volatility, which was about the variation of volatility that we had, over time. And then
we should explain for people that volatility is the variance of this time series
exactly. It's the square root of the variance of the expected time series annualized. Okay, and it's a parameter for an option because an option has some convexity that depends on that. So it's very simple. You price the option at, instead of pricing the option at, say, sigma, you price the option at 110% of sigma, and you price it at 90% of sigma, and see the effect. Very simple heuristic. And now that heuristic, I haven't discovered anything else in my life.
So wait a minute, when you say price it at that, there is a Black-Scholes formula which tells you what it should be priced at given a particular volatility. And you say, what happens if
let me give you a demonstration using Mathematica, all right? And I'm going to do it using Mathematica, and I'm going to do it using the Gaussian distribution and how we can obtain fat tails from Gaussian distribution. Okay. So, do you mind? I'm a little slower than you from Mathematica. Will you guys be patient with me? All right.
Yeah. We're.
So let me, unless I can find an existing program, let me do the following. Share screen. And then I have Mathematica Untitled 2. Okay. And I do the window magnification 150%.
It'll probably be okay. Yeah, 150%.
Okay, 150%. Let's try that. Okay, so let me do it in Mathematica, and let's do the following. All right. Let's say here I have PDF. Okay, normal distribution. Okay. It's mu and sigma. Let's say mu is 0 and sigma, let's say, is 1.1. Okay, 10% higher. X plus PDF normal distribution 0.9 X. Okay, you do that. 1/2 Okay, and actually I can let me do this. Let me do this, and since they say plot PDF normal distribution x minus 4, 4. Okay. Okay. Okay, you have a sort of like a fat-tailed Gaussian. Okay, so here let me do.
I can't tell that's fat-tailed. I mean, for me, that just looks
But
like.
let me show you how we can tell it's fat-tailed. 1 plus a. Okay, and here 1 minus a. Okay, and now I do manipulate. Okay, a
0 probably to something.
yeah, but it's easier to do it discrete. Okay, 0, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. Okay, and we do a control with it. Okay, plot. I do two things. I do a control with it of a normal distribution. Okay, PDF normal distribution with x at just 1. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Now we do manipulate. You can
That's
see
0. So they coincide.
Okay, they don't coincide no more.
Right.
Okay, you got fat tails. Higher shoulders. Okay. So this is one way to say that there are two ways to do the thing and to write. Let me write using Mathematica here. Okay, I have f. Okay, of sigma. F of sigma. Okay, I do f of sigma average. F of sigma versus f average sigma.
Yep.
Okay, and the difference between them gives you a bias. Okay, so everything I've done is variation around these.
Okay, but
nothing,
yeah.
nothing particularly more intelligent than this. Okay, except that you go in higher dimension, you start playing with correlation, you start playing with other things. But there's not much more intelligent than this, as you can see. Okay, look here, you can get extremely fat tails here. Say 0.9. Yeah, this is what happened here.
No, it's okay. Just the pull down should have a 0.9 in it.
Okay,
just decided that.
there we go. Look how crazy it is. And let me do a plot range all here. Plot range all. Now this is a rough way to do this game. You see, a very rough way to do this game. You can make a stochastic. You in other words have a second layer of stochasticity. But the problem is when I take let me apply this to anything in economics. All right.
Hold on. Let me just explain what you mean by a second layer of stochasticity. What you're saying is the first layer of stochasticity is there's a random walkish thing that's bouncing around with a certain variance.
Exactly.
And the second level of stochasticity is there's variance of the variance, so to speak.
Exactly. The variance has a variance. Here I use Bernoulli for the variance. Okay, two-state thing, but then you can make it more complicated and more complex. So the way I traded options is I discovered that because an option, instead of taking an option off the average variance, you take an average option across the two-state variance. Now it makes the out of the money options, the options that are remote, it increases the price considerably.
So why isn't this thing that you're constructing from these two options? Oh, it's because of the non-commuting of averaging and taking the function f. Function f is your option function.
Exactly. So as an option trader, I function like that all the time. Whenever I see a parameter, and I told myself, you don't need to fix the economics. All you need is introduce a second layer of stochasticity into the game.
You know, for the sake of some of the people who are here, maybe we should explain what an option is.
Okay. No, but I mean, maybe it's complicated to go into options because I discovered it was a complicated thing, but I can apply it to simpler things.
I love the way that you refer to functions in terms of puts and calls, where some people, if you do machine learning, it'll be ReLUs. If you
Exactly,
do, it'll be polynomials for other people. But
maybe an easier way to do things is an example I gave an anti-fragile. Okay, let's forget this. You have a grandmother. I mean, I'm sure a lot of the high school people still have grandmothers around. Okay, and if you don't have grandmothers, think of granduncle. All right, to make it well distributed gender and geographic and everything. Okay, so you have grandmother or granduncle. You pick. It's your choice. Okay, now your grandmother or granduncle is going to spend what's the best temperature? Say 70 degrees, no? In Florida, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, in Florida, no? It's a great
That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So what is better? Okay, to have the person spend day 1 and day 2 at 70 degrees, or to have your granduncle or grandmother spend the first day at 0 degrees and the second day at 140 degrees, for an average of 70 degrees. What do you prefer, the first case or the second case?
Okay, wait a minute. Go through the cases again. 0 degrees and 140 are very bad for humans.
70, 70, okay.
Okay.
Or 0,
140.
140.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Okay.
Yep. So we prefer the first case.
Is this big enough, or you can?
Yeah. This is full fine.
Okay,
Yep.
So you can make it this way. So it's the same game I'm playing. Okay, and I discovered something called Ricardo. Have you heard of Ricardo's comparative advantage?
I've heard of it. Other people probably haven't.
So let me explain it very, very simply. That I realized there's something wrong in economics because they believe that 70 and 70 or 0, 140 are equivalent. They only look at the average of the parameter. So I started spotting in the central papers in economics or central books something, and the error, you can see it in Ricardo. And Ricardo came up with the following idea, right? He said that countries should specialize where they have something called a comparative advantage, not absolute advantage. So let's say that you're the best brain surgeon in town, but also happen to be the best person in town at driving an Uber, okay? You're not gonna do both, okay? You're gonna do what makes you the most money and let someone drive the Uber, although you're better at both. So, and in the example, Ricardo and all the economists use the story of Portugal versus the UK and wine versus cloth by saying, okay, Portugal does wine, we do the cloth because of this concept. Okay, and they consider the average price. Like here, the grandmother, 70 degrees, okay, which is the average. Now, I came up with, what if there's a fatwa on wine in Portugal? Right now, what would or what if something? So if the average is, let's say they come up with 70 and 70 equivalent, okay, the price, and they give you the calculus of that, the calculus falls apart under introducing a very simple layer of stochasticity. In other words, making these numbers random. Okay, that's very simple. So I started doing this, and it's explained in the back of Anti-Fragile, and no economist has to date been able to grasp what I was talking about.
Okay, we might have some sample economists here. We'll see whether they.
I mean, I'm saying your model is right. Okay, but you got to consider what would maybe it's right, maybe it's not right, but you got to consider some layer of stochasticity. So we can apply this to economic reason without going into options, something very complicated. I'm applying it first to your granduncle, okay, and next to wine versus clause in Ricardo's example, which is taught in every book in beginning in economics 101, okay, and I applied that to the Gaussian distribution, which is a very simple 101, okay, of what you learn when you learn about probability. You learn about Gaussian distribution, and then we can apply it to other things. Something very, 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 very simple, other things. So what happens if I make that price, all right, that is deemed to be fixed, I make it stochastic, variable. Now, someone may tell me, how do you know it's this distribution, not that distribution? They start arguing, and I tell them, it's fine. Now we're talking about details.
Well, I mean, but so one question is,
Yeah.
The central people in many fields, including, I suspect, economics,
Yes.
believe the central limit theorem tells them everything. It says that, all distributions end up being Gaussian. And I
Yes.
think, as soon as you're talking about fat tails,
Yes.
you're away from that story.
That's why we have Mathematica here, all right? So let me explain the central limit to everyone here using Mathematica, okay? So let me make a, have you heard of, okay, R equals, all right, random variate uniform distribution, okay? Well, let me see my screen because it's not showing my screen. Okay, uniform distribution. Okay, so I do R and it gives me a number between 0 and 1. Okay, I can make it discrete uniform, doesn't matter. Okay, all right, I can make it 0, 1. So let's do here table R 10, 3. Okay, or let's say 10, 5. Histogram. I know I could put upstairs, but we're going to see why I need R to be separate. Okay. Look at what you get. You get numbers between 0 and 1 like that. Okay. Now let's do the following. If I add up two numbers, obviously I'm going to get the maximum, the most likely probability at 1. Okay, because you get 1 is 1/2. 1.5, 0.1, 1.1, but to get here on the left 0 or to get 2, okay, you need a lot of work, help from God, because only 2 can give you 2 and 0 can give you 2. No combination can give you that, all right? So as you see now already, you see the distribution is already not flat anymore. You sum two numbers, and you already have this distribution. Now let's do it this way, plus R. You almost have a Gaussian by summing up 3 numbers. Okay, look. All right. So this is called the central limit theorem. And the R condition under which, as you sum up numbers, or average numbers, same thing, however you want to do it. Okay, we could average them. Okay, you get the same. So no, sorry. Okay, average now, So however you want to do it, okay, as you sum up numbers, you end up with a Gaussian. Now I picked this one because this is the one that goes there the fastest, but you can pick the random walk. Random ones and zeros, okay, you sum them, you do it so many times, then you have a binomial, and so on, you get a Gaussian. If you want, I could give you this as an example, but we can speed up. So that's the story in every textbook.
Yep.
My problem is that this reaches the central limit very, very quickly. So, and let me stop here and tell you there are two theorems that work together in economics and in statistics and everywhere. One is called the central limit that we just saw, means you can use a Gaussian if you have a sum that's large enough, without going into details. Okay, and the second one is the law of large numbers, which tells you that as you sum up that stuff, you get the average. Okay, so for example, let's do a distribution of the average of this. Okay, you do the distribution of the average. I do a random variate. Any distribution. Let's say I take uniform distribution. Because all right, and then I do 100. Mean. So here, if I do table of that, discrete plot. So if I do it many times, or if I can do this table of this. Forget having 100. I just do 30. Let me do 30, okay? okay, mean, and I do it, say, 10,000 times, histogram. And the reason, the reason I'm invited here is because as an amateur, you want to play with things. And to play with things, you got to do Monte Carlo. And other programs are little, Mathematica, I think in terms of Mathematica. So,
I love seeing you actually use 10 to the 4 with a superscript. That's
I hate the other the other four. I hate the aesthetics of it are not okay. So look what you're getting here. The distribution of the mean is very concentrated. Okay, if I go to 200 and if I take 300, you see, look at this. If I take 300, it's going to be even more concentrated. Okay, look at this. Most observation are between 46 and observation between 48 and 52. Okay, that's called the law of large numbers. That you're gonna have the distribution of your mean compressing as your sample becomes larger. Okay, and the variance of your mean is going to be small. Now I realize that when you work in an environment that is called extremistan, all that only holds at infinity, if it holds. So let's do a very simple thought experiment with a different. Have you heard of Pareto 80-20?
Pareto distributions, yeah.
Pareto 80 or any distribution. Let me take a student T distribution. Okay. Fat tails. Student T has Pareto tails. Okay. Let me see pedagogically, since we have high school people and we have physicists. I don't want to bore the physicists and I don't want to upset the high school students. So let me find the most well-known distribution is a Pareto 80-20.
Okay.
This maps to Pareto distribution 1, who cares about the 1, and 1.14. Okay. All right. And let's see if I do this one.
Yeah, show the PDF.
Sorry?
Show the PDF maybe.
Okay, so let me do the PDF. PDF, this, X, minimum value is 1. 1.
Don't you want to do a plot?
Sorry, PDF, sorry.
That worked.
So now plot. Sorry. PDF X112 I'm supposed to do PDF Pareto distribution X. Sorry. Okay. So this is how it looks like. Okay. This is how the distribution looks like. It has most of its values here, and it has one excursion in the tail.
And the reason it's called 80-20 is because 80% of it lives in 20% of the range.
Exactly. So if I do the CDF of the cumulative, without going into detail, 80% of the people will own 20% of the land, and 20% of the people own 80% of the land. And if you recurse, it means that 1% of the people will own 50% of the land. So you continue with it. So so that's a Pareto distribution. Now let's do a random variate with that distribution. Okay. We do random variate. Okay. And let's do 30, all right? The problem with this, you're gonna see.
Left the PDF in there.
Sorry, no, random variate, so yeah, PDF. So you get a lot of numbers, and I do a table, and I do take the average of 30. Mean, so I got the mean, okay. And you can see the mean will fluctuate every time I get different numbers. And here I do table, the mean, and I do 10 to the 4, okay.
You want another bracket?
Table 10 to the 4.
No, you just need the bracket.
Yeah, I need the bracket here. And then I do histogram. So no, I was looking for Diego there at the same time. This is why, so maybe here I can make it cleaner. No.
I think you just want larger number there, right?
Yeah, I want a larger number.
No, I'm sorry. No, what you sorry that you've got
Let me
that's
tell
on the
you.
histogram thing. You want to get rid of the thing for the histogram. You want to change your 10 to the 4, right?
Yeah, no, the range. The problem is, let me show you. This is not. This is a feature, not a bug, as they say, because some averages are at 1,000, and that histogram is showing all the range.
Oh, I see.
You see what I mean? So some of them you cannot control from up there.
Right.
From here, you cannot control because you don't know where you're gonna get.
Right.
See, it's
and
very.
there's a black swan wandering around on the tail there.
So you get this, and even better if you do this. Okay, you do this, and then you do the max. You're even going to be more surprised with the max you're going to be getting. This max is 19, and you can get 28, 12. But sometimes you get 2,000. Like here, we have 1,000. Okay. So max for an average at 1,000, which means that the max was maybe 30,000. You see, 23, and then you got a 30,000. So if you have the patience, you play with these. So this one will never follow this one will never obey the central limit theorem. Okay, and we can
but the conditions of the central limit theorem are that the distribution has bounded variance.
This doesn't have bounded variance.
Right.
But there's something even worse. It obey the condition to obey to get to the what's the name, the large numbers is have bounded mean, no? Which this one exists. The mean here exists. If you look at the mean, is going to be alpha over 1 over 1 minus alpha. It's going to be around 8. Okay. Okay, so but it has a bounded mean, but the problem is that given that the variance is infinite, okay, that mean is going to jump around a lot. So the idea is to get the same stability you get with a Gaussian upstairs with 30 observations. How many do you need? Let's let someone guess.
All right. People, how many?
How many? Who can venture a number?
Come on, we got lots of people here. Somebody.
10 to the 6.
How much?
10 to the 6.
Who said 10 to the 6? Why do you exaggerate so much?
I just pick the extremes when I have to make a choice.
Okay. You're not exaggerating. You're, as a matter of fact, underestimating. 10 to the 13. 10 to the 13. To compress the variance enough, in other words, to get the mean, and the same reliability for the mean. For a sample of 30, you need 10 to the 13.
Okay. So economically, I mean, if you're a trader, everybody's dead by that time.
Exactly. So you got to work with other techniques to figure out the mean. Some other characteristics of the distribution. The whole idea is that maybe you don't need to know the mean, you need to know other properties, okay? But the central in this environment is that economics has been using distributions that are more like this one. On one hand, they say, well, the Gini is high, we're concentrated. On the other hand, using tools designed for the variance, thinking that with n of 30, they're happy.
So let's, okay, so I want to, if we could try taking this in a something that goes further towards the fundamental physics story, okay? Because this phenomenon of Gaussians, all that kind of thing, it's a thing one in physics, you know, those kinds of things show up in statistical mechanics. And one of the questions, you know, when you have a bunch of gas molecules bouncing around in a box, the averages end up being these Gaussian kinds of things. There are occasionally long tail phenomena, but mostly in statistical mechanics, one's concerned with things that end up being sort of roughly Gaussian and so on. So the question, you know, in what we've now been able to understand in physics is that just like there are discrete gas molecules bouncing around in boxes to make fluids and things, so also there are kind of discrete atoms of space that make space-time and so on. So that may seem irrelevant, but the question now is, let's try and think about economics, and let's ask, what are the atoms of economics? In other words, if we try and break down an economic system into the kind of smallest elements of what's going on, what are those smallest elements? And do they aggregate up to something which is like statistical mechanics or like what we see in our physics project?
Okay, I have. Let me make a side comment before I answer yours. If I maximize, if I say I'm trying to maximize the entropy of a distribution, maximize entropy is the expectation of p log of p. Okay, or in this case, continuous case, p of x log of p of x. Okay, so if I maximize entropy under no constraint, I don't know if you can get a distribution under no constraint. I think under no constraint you get a Cauchy or a verified. So if you maximize entropy under constraint of variance and mean and variance, I think I have the Mathematica file here somewhere, you get a Gaussian. So you have to realize that you're bounding the equivalent in physics would be you're putting a boundary on energy because the variance is energy or whatever, however you want to define it. Okay. So the problem with economics is that we don't have anything binding a number. Like I remember when Feynman was giving his lecture when it was years ago, 30 years ago, I remember he saying, oh, we talk about astronomical number, we should be talking about economic numbers.
What do you mean?
He said, there was expression, very large number, astronomic numbers.
Yes.
He said, now that the deficit is reaching billions and billions and billions, we're talking about economic numbers, okay? And in the Black Swan, I explained it. I said the price can go from 1 to a billion, or like say Bitcoin. Tomorrow, people decide to price it for $100 billion each Bitcoin. Be my guest. That number is meaningless, all right? Because there's no boundaries on.
Well, okay. So this is a very interesting point. Okay, so one thing I wanted to come to is sort of the definition of value in economics.
Yes.
And in a sense, you're saying, what I'm trying to understand is you've got, it seems, in an economic system, some network of transactions that are happening. I mean, I don't know how you view sort of at a granular level, what is an economic system? It's presumably a bunch of people making transactions with each other. Is that a correct picture or not?
No, the way I view economics is completely different representation. Let me tell you the way I view the world. And as you see it from finance and economics. In finance, I view the world as arbitrage.
Uh-huh.
And in economics, I view the world as law of one price.
What does that mean?
So that things converge, that you cannot have one good, priced at $1 and have an identical good priced at $72. That's a law of one price. And I've used it, for example, to explain why there are laws defining the relationship between currencies, called, the purchasing power parity and stuff like that. But let me give you a very simple example. If the Swiss franc in Switzerland is multiplied by 10, and if you have free exchange between Switzerland and France, then no person, except for those under substances or stuff like that, would buy goods in Switzerland. They would go buy them in France.
Right.
And then what happened is that the vendors in Switzerland will not be able to sell, and the currency will depreciate, and the French currency, assuming its own currency, would appreciate, and then sure enough, then you'd have the same parity between currencies. Okay, so in other words, and I traded securities as a trader, looking for similarities between items priced differently. So, for example, if you have an option on this item and correlates heavily the option on that other item, I can use one as substitute for the other at cheaper cost, and this is called the replication business. So I wrote my entire business into something I call dynamic replication, and that was actually my doctoral thesis. How to dynamically replicate an item into another. And dynamically, you could probably replicate an option into a stock, or stock into an option, or as a
payoff. By replicate, you mean that the distribution, that all these various distributions that you compute for one of these instruments agree with the distributions you get for the other instrument. Is that what you
Exactly.
mean?
Or dynamically, for example, if you own a stock or okay, and sorry, if you own an option or you own a stock that you buy and sell continuously, you replicate it.
Right.
Except that when you're under fat tail, these don't work dynamically. That was my subspecialty is breakdown of these theories locally and where they don't break down. So to go back, I mean, put it under some form of clarity. My first answer that in economics we don't have energy when prices are concerned. So for example, a currency like the mark, the mark of the Reichsmark, I think I forgot the name of Germany during Weimar, went from $1 to $1 to 3 trillion to $1.
Right.
But you cannot have a random variable, okay, that can reach that level in the physical world that easily.
Okay, so I don't think, I mean, I think that the analogy with value is probably not energy. It's probably something more to do with the way that an observer samples the system.
I see.
That's something that can be much more arbitrary.
Okay, I think in modern economics, or the way I view, I'm not an economist, I'm a financial economist. And for us, we don't know what value means. We have arbitrage replication equivalent.
Well, okay, but so for you, I mean, so by arbitrage, I mean, one way to think about arbitrage in a sort of physics point of view is it's like curvature in a space. You go around a closed path and you're taking 90-degree angles going around a rectangle. You don't get back to where you started from again. I mean, that's kind of a physicist analog of arbitrage in the sense that you go around a loop. You go around this financial loop. You're converting this to that. You're converting this to that.
Yes.
And it doesn't close. You make money by going around that loop.
Or you make little residual money because effectively the world is not as finance is not as inefficient. They call it inefficient where you can find that stuff.
Right.
And let me give you an example in finance where my idea breaks down and why, in fact, in the long run, it tends to hold. I don't know if you remember at some point, I think Volkswagen owns Porsche, or one company owned the other. And the company that was owned, its market value was higher than the company that owned it.
That happened with Palm, right? That was
It happened with Porsche. It happens periodically where you have these absurdities. Mm-hmm. But you cannot arbitrage it because you have some idiot holding on to shares and doesn't want to sell it to you. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for example, so you have things that make markets not as frictionless and efficient, but in general, markets tend to be not that stupid. So in other words, you can have stupid pockets of inefficiencies, but they don't last for a long time. They may last a year, 2 years. They don't last decades, and if they last decades, they don't last for a century. You see.
I thought they only lasted minutes in many cases.
No, in many cases, when you have a focus, or you can replicate easily something against the other, it lasts seconds. Mm-hmm. Okay, like for example, but there's things that last longer. I was doing currency option arbitrage between currency options using what are called triangle arbitrages, where you buy New Zealand dollar volatility, an option against Australian dollar, do Australian dollar against Hong Kong dollar against something else, and end up with enough money to go pay for your rent. You get the idea. So you could do these things for and have sip and drink while doing it. You see. Whereas, but there's more narrow arbitrages that take nanosecond. Mm-hmm. So, and you have statistical arbitrages where you're making a bet on statistical relationship, and you think in the long run you're going to do okay thanks to the law of large numbers. So, but trying to come back and trying to say they are foundational economics, I think I read enough books on economics that say that, but to tell you how unimportant it is, that I forgot about it. I forgot what they are. If you say foundational economics,
I'm not sure there are well-defined foundations. I mean, it's not like an axiomatic theory. I mean, one might think there was a version of economics where you start from sort of axioms of human psychological behavior or something.
We have in finance axiomatic stuff that's quite robust. but and effectively linked to what I'm talking about, absence of arbitrage, called the free lunch theorems, absence of arbitrage, complete markets, having a pricing kernel or things like that. They are, but the problem is they're made under strong assumption. In other words, they assume that some linearity is somewhere. So they make assumptions that don't hold in the real world.
Well, but by linearity, you mean, I mean, are they things that depend on things like, you know, fixed point theorems, or are they things that depend on Gaussian distributions?
Okay, by linearity is, you know, factor PCA or factor analysis?
Yes.
Where you can have a price as a function of these factors.
Right.
Okay, so you have a linear.
You're essentially making a model where you say this variable can be determined as maybe some linear combination of these other kinds of.
Exactly. So they try to do that in finance, called the factors. Okay, so you have factors, and then each variable is function of the factors, and then therefore you can price everything with these basic factors, and or whatever factor you have, and a waning in importance, like in a PCA. And I showed in the book on the fat tails, they may exist, but you don't know what the factors are.
Well, those would be sort of the primes of the financial system. They would be you know, what the index funds should be attaching themselves to.
That's what they do. They do models around that. But my problem is to go back to what the parameter is. You see, again, I mean, is it the average factor, or is you see, or do you have?
You might want to stop sharing, because then we'd be bigger on the screen.
Okay,
for what it's worth.
Stop sharing. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
So I mean, I have, you're asking me a question I never thought about before, because I don't think in terms of these economic. I mean, I came to economics without knowing anything about anything. You see. And then later on picked up stuff. So I went backwards. So I don't ask myself question coming from stuff, but then started linking. Say, oh, what's the main difference? Someone asked me with statistical mechanics. I say you don't have energy in economics.
Right. I think that's too narrow a view of statistical mechanics. I mean, I think that the big question, the big sort of idea of statistical mechanics as the things that we're finding about space-time and so on is, there are simple underlying processes going on, and it doesn't matter much what those individual processes are, but in the aggregate, they have certain behavior.
Yeah, so we have a mean field problem. I know in economics, okay, which is that, and I can explain it again here in terms of the Gaussian. Okay, what is the law of large numbers? It's an aggregation.
Yes.
What is central limit? It's an aggregation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now some things aggregate very well. Okay, so you don't need to know the details because overall it's going to work out very well. So it becomes sampling, when you sample portfolio, say you built the portfolio, if we lived in the Gaussian world, then there's something called portfolio theory that would work beautifully. Okay. Right. The problem is we don't live in that world. So to understand the behavior of an ensemble of securities, okay, you cannot obtain that as easily as if you don't have. So you see, at the limit, things become deterministic, but your portfolio is not large enough for that to happen.
Well, the basic claim is that the tail will always eventually wag the dog.
That's exactly the thing in economics and in a lot of these lot of variables related to finance and the drivers that we have. But so to give you a very simple example, and I have a Mathematica page for that, is I take something called principal component analysis.
Right.
And in fact, and I say, even if a true factor analysis worked, it doesn't, but let's say it worked, and the factors were constant, didn't change over time, didn't mutate or anything, all you would see is spurious factors. For the same reason, the law of large number is slow.
Yeah.
So you would not see the real factors from your sample.
Right.
So okay. So that's the first problem. The second problem we have in economics is dimensionality. That when correlation itself is a random variable that also obeys the law of large numbers, except that when you have a high dimensionality, you end up having a lot of securities and not enough data per security. So to give you a very simple example, let's say I have 1,000 securities. Okay, how many correlation do I have? I have, say, 1,000, one half of 1,000, say about 1/2,000 squared, n minus 1, all right? So 1/2,000 squared, you remove the diagonal and then you count. Okay, so and now I add one security. Now that additional security, you got to look at correlation with the other 1,000. Now I add one, so every time I add a security, okay, I add the spuriousness because people look at the extreme correlation or the high correlations. You see, I mean, to give you a very simple example, if I have a lot of securities on this planet, I will find exactly a one security that correlates 100% with your cholesterol level and its fluctuation. You see, so what happens is, so when you have a lot of securities, to stabilize, you must have a lot more data per security. So the problem is that our spurious information grows with squares with a number of variable, but the contraction to the law of large numbers goes way too slowly.
Okay, but let me take, so one argument you're making is eventually the tail eats you. Eventually tails,
That's one of the
come down.
problems. That is one of the problems.
But then I'm going to make another point, which is that there's a lot of kind of the normal operation of economics in which you're not being eaten by tails, in which people are just buying and selling lettuces or whatever else it is. Is there, what presumably there is some level of kind of, there's something to describe that isn't the unpredictable, undescribable tails.
Yeah, I mean, then you're dealing with, if you're operating a grocery store, then it becomes grocery store management. And you don't need an economist for that. You need a good grocery store expert. And it becomes a local expertise of how to handle grocery store, because the income for a grocery store may not be determined by the tails because of geography and stuff like that. Maybe thin tail, but not too thin tails, actually, not Gaussian. Then maybe we can talk about it. But then the minute you're talking about economic variables that may interest anyone, you're starting a corporation, Wolfram Research or Maz Bahrami and company, or whatever company you're doing, all right? The minute you're selling to more than one person on this planet, okay, and then you're not confining yourself to a neighborhood, then becomes out of control.
Okay. Let's
give you a very simple example. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to make sure that we covered a few other things, because I think people. So I mean, one thing I've been curious about is, okay, in the current economic system, maybe the sort of atomic pieces of the economic system are people doing transactions with each other. Maybe in the future, it's not people doing that. It's, bots doing it. And the question is, what does it look like in the current sort of, so one question that seems to me, maybe this is one non-trivial fact about economics is that money exists and is meaningful. That is, that it's not self-evident that you can, it does not seem self-evident that there is a kind of scalar quantity that represents the value of things. In other words, it could be the case that whenever you want to trade two things, the things would have all kinds of attributes. And in order for a trade to happen, those things have to, they have to match in their fame. They have to match in their, financial whatever. They have to match.
Yeah, okay, that's okay. You say there's something we call the numerator, and it is essential in finance and financial economics. There's a numerator, the unit of account. Okay, is that you're going to have a home currency, what we call a home currency. And the home currency can be expressed in in baseball cards. You can have your home currency in anything. Okay.
But why is it obvious that there has to be a scalar measure of value? Why is it obvious that transactions can be?
Because then you no longer you cannot enforce the law of one price if you don't have one unit
Absolutely.
by which you're valuing everything else. This is where, and also you cannot have arbitrage if you have one unit. But let me tell you the complication.
Mm-hmm.
Is that two people can be transacting, each one having a different currency.
Yep.
And so the strange thing is the distribution of these two will not be symmetric. So to give you an example from Dynamic Hedging, my book, let's say your home currency is US dollar and my home currency is the British pound. Okay, to reverse things. Okay, now the British pound goes to infinity. What happens to US dollar, to the parity? For one goes to zero. For one, the other one goes to zero. Because my unit of account is British pound, yours is US dollars. So by Jensen inequality, you see, by Jensen's inequality, the other one is convex with respect to yours. So to give you a very simple idea, is that let's say the British pound now is what, about, let's say 140, okay? If the British pound goes to zero with respect to the US dollar, the dollar with respect to the British pound goes to infinity.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have two different dynamics. One is skewed left, one is skewed right. And when we price options between two different people, okay, the same equation doesn't reverse. You don't get the same price.
Okay. I don't think in terms of options, so it's harder for me to.
Okay. Let's say in terms of probability or probability of event, because you have a skewed two log normal distribution, each one skewed in a different direction. We can be using the same distribution, and the probability of the British pound going over, $5 for me, okay, is maybe 10%, and for you maybe 90%.
Yeah. Okay.
I call it the two country paradoxes. So I don't want people to drown in that notion, except that for two statements. The first one, you must have a numerator to be coherent and have the law of one price. And two, your dynamics for your numerator, okay, would never be symmetric to dynamics into another numerator.
You see, I think that
Yes.
that this point about numeraire, as you're calling it, I
Yes.
suspect that I mean, we have some analogies to this in the physics project about kind of what it means to construct space-time and so on. This is a long story, not to be told here. And I think it is not as obvious that, in other words, you say economics as we know it with things like arbitrage wouldn't work unless there was this numeraire idea. But the question is, let's say that there was an economy where everything was just done by bots, and you simply told your bot, I have these preferences, I want to achieve this.
Yes.
And all the bot is going to do is do barter trading with other bots.
Yes.
So in the end, you want to buy a book, and you're going to buy it from somebody who in the end wants to, I don't know, provide food for their cat or something.
Yes.
And there's a chain of bots that eventually go from the, getting the book to providing food for the cat. But nowhere in this whole picture was there any numeraire.
There would be an implied numeraire.
Okay.
If for the system to be coherent.
Okay, I think this is exactly what I suspect is the case. And
It is very similar to physics, where you have the observer traveling at different speed and stuff like that, but the system stays coherent.
Yeah.
It's coherent for every observer, okay, and it's also coherent in transaction intra-observers.
Right. Well, I mean, so this is why I think there's an analogy between what we're doing in physics and
That's the numeraire one the numeraire is an analogy because have different. Yes, go ahead.
So I mean, one of my exercises then is a feature of physics is time dilation and relativity. Okay, so
Yes.
our explanation of time dilation in modern times is sort of everything that's going on in the universe is computational. You can either use your computation to compute what happens next in time, or you can use their computation to move in space, to replace yourself in space. If you're using some of your computation to move in space, that's going at some speed, then you will have less computation to use to evolve in time, so time will effectively run slower for you. I mean, that's the intuition.
Identical. Okay, you probably can find an analog in economics, but I'm not an expert on that. I have a book here that I couldn't go. I think I've read laboriously. It took me about 10 years to read the 22 pages. On Entropy and Economics by Nicholas something Rodgan or something. So it took me 10 years to read 21 pages. Right?
I don't think, but I think entropy is a confusing concept. See, entropy.
Yeah, okay, no. So go ahead.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm curious. Even in the spatialization of economics, is there a notion of kind of spatialized economics? Presumably, in times when the economics, the economy was largely agricultural and so on, there was a notion to, you dig up the carrots in this place and you're going to move them to some other place and so on. There's some spatial component to economics. I mean, in modern times with,
Okay, I haven't thought about it in these terms, just simply because it takes me a while to,
It doesn't matter for markets. For markets, you've got fiber optics going all over the world.
Yeah, I know, but the structure of transaction hasn't changed since the beginning of times. Okay, the difference that we have today is that the tails are more important. And let me explain how that happened. Okay, and this has to do with connectivity, which is the most important thing for economics is connectivity. So to explain the dynamics and why things are getting more fat-tailed. Let's say that you're an opera singer and that's the example I've used. Okay, in Naples in the 1800s. Okay, you have a good life because nobody could transport goods from New York, namely singing. So so people can sing in Milan and they don't no threat to you. So therefore, you're going to have the income, local income, determined locally. Okay. Now, let's say that someone invented something called the VCR or stuff like that, where suddenly now you're being displaced by audiovisual.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have planes, and now people can fly and go to Milan and New York, other places, see other opera singers. Okay, now that creates a winner-take-all effect, where smaller and probably let's say perceived to be the best, okay, will take all the money.
Mm-hmm.
And this applies to practically everything. Like Google today taking all the money for browser worldwide, whereas in the past no farmer could take all the money for farming worldwide. All right, you're very local, so things are being delocalized. Mm-hmm. in many respects. They're being delocalized in literature, where you have a clustering to a smaller number of books worldwide, and you have stuff like that. So these dynamics come from connectivity. So the way I look at it, that we have had a statistical transfer, a probabilistic distribution, okay, changing in nature, but the transactions being the same. You go, you sing, you get your money, all right? But here, in one case, it is fat-tailed, in one case, it's much less fat-tailed, you see? Or you do transaction. But I never went into whether they are constants in these things other than arbitrages. And the very simple arbitrage is I'm not going to pay $10 for this if I can pay $7.91 for it here, you see?
Right.
And then you can say, you can make the chain not pairwise, but generalize it to people doing this, and then suddenly it becomes arbitrage. So the way I view the world is just arbitrage, you see? So, and if you have differences in price, because in between things, because they're not arbitrageable.
Right.
Or sometimes there's too much risk in doing the arbitrage.
I think we should, but before we run out of time, we've got to talk about cryptocurrencies.
Okay, great, thanks.
And actually, I think, did Fred want to make a comment? I noticed Fred.
Yeah, it was mostly that, transaction costs. It was something that Nassim was saying. Transaction costs are a measure of distance between
Yeah, transaction difficulty or transaction cost.
And
There. Fair enough. Okay. Anyway, back to cryptocurrencies. So Nassim just sent me this piece that basically says Bitcoin is worthless.
It was zero, exactly.
That's called worthless. If it's worth zero, it's
Yes, exactly.
it's worthless, right? And as I understand the argument, part of what it starts from is this idea. I mean, people always used to say the value of a stock should be the discounted future value of all its dividends and so on.
Yes.
Do people still believe that?
Yes, because when you buy a stock, but that company stopped compensating you in dividend.
But lots of tech companies have never paid dividends.
Yeah, because they put the money in instead of paying you a dividend. I don't want the dividend. I want the value to stay in the stock.
Yeah.
Okay, so with the whole idea, the idea, the way I see it is the stock, the discounted value, what cash flow I'm going to get. Whether I'm going to get dividend, I don't need the dividend. Okay, I get a lump sum at the end. You see, so the way you look at it is at period zero, I'm going to get. Okay, I price the stock as if the dividend I'm going to get period one, plus valuation period one, and how do you evaluate period one? It's a dividend you get at period two plus valuation period two. Okay, if you change those valuation using something called iterated expectations, okay, and end up the stock today is going to be the cash flow I'm going to get it on it plus the price at infinity.
How long do you think you should wait? I mean, like, are there examples where people have waited 100 years?
No, because these things happen. I mean, when you look at pet.com, I mean, the reason stocks, have ended up having value is because you always find either some idiot to buy the company and pay up a lot, okay, or the company eventually makes a lot of money.
Yeah.
You see, so the people doubt the dividend discount model, not on grounds of, hey, nobody cares about cash flow from the stock, because the difference between a Ponzi and that is a Ponzi is something that had absolutely no value, and we know it has no value. Okay, it's a pyramid scheme, and hopefully we won't stuck with it. We're going to sell it to someone even more foolish than we are. A greater fool.
Okay, so your argument.
Stocks are priced off of some kind of expected cash flow in the future. Sorry, go ahead.
No. So I mean, your argument with respect to Bitcoin is, at the end of the day, there's nothing there. That's the basic, as opposed to a company.
No, there's one thing I said. The difference is that gold, for example, I explained gold. I have gold here. Gold doesn't give you cash flow. But during that period, okay, it is a consumer item, all right? So I'm paying to wear the jewelry, okay? So that, because what happened is that if you're discounting P very far down, it's worth zero.
Right, but so the question for cryptocurrencies, one of the questions is are they actually useful for something? I mean, as opposed to just being thought of as a pure repository of value or place to speculate and so on, are they actually useful for anything? And I mean, they could be useful merely for being able to transfer money between obscure places that you can't usually transfer money. They could also...
There are other words. I mean, okay, so my point about Bitcoin is that the first thing that people weren't getting, tell me it's successful. Why is it successful? Is anybody using it? No, the price is going up. So that part, you see, and not because it's useful for transactions. Because if it's useful for transactions, say the web doesn't have a market value. Can you buy the web if you're bullish on the web? No, you buy a company using the web.
Yeah, I mean, look, Bitcoin is being used for some transactions. I mean, Iranian oil traders and things are using it.
Okay, yeah, no, it is Bitcoin or other. So the point is, it's too volatile to be a currency, and you should not price a currency. The success of a currency is in its uses, and then the other problem. I have two more problems. Gold, if I leave it alone on the ground, doesn't degrade. Doesn't require maintenance. What happens with Bitcoin, you must apply a hazard model to it. Like I apply to the life of a person. If a person dies, there's a small probability of people dying. Okay, But if they die, they're done. So it's an absorbing barrier. So if I apply an absorbing barrier to Bitcoin, I cannot apply that absorbing barrier to other things.
Well, you're saying gold will be forever, so to speak, like diamonds, and that there's
No,
nothing.
not financially, physically, physically cannot degrade. Doesn't have an absorbing barrier, or at least not in the next 100,000 years.
Yes.
But Bitcoin, if people lose interest in the technology, okay, all your assets on it are vaporware.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like if people, if a bank, if people just decide, oh, they're lost interest in running the bank, it's the same type of thing, isn't it? I mean, if people
the
just
bank
say,
wires the money to you and etc. But with Bitcoin, okay, it's all this value on the ledger.
no, but if people just, you know, if there's a bank in the Wild West and it had a vault in it and everybody just leaves the bank and they just say, forget it, it's going to turn into a ghost town, you lose the money as well.
No, because you can take the money. You can say, okay, we're going to open the bank, and this is your $500. This is yours. Thanks, bye. You close. But with Bitcoin, if they do that, Bitcoin will be worth zero because nobody's going to maintain that ledger.
Well, okay, but okay. So first question
There's a
is,
small probability of that happening. There's a tiny probability of that happening. All right. Maybe it may take 10 years, 20 years. If I know in the future it will happen, then the value got to be. This is very simple. I know of no other model than discounted cash flow to price anything. You see, and if there is an absorbing barrier, then it must have a use in between, which is
okay,
probably
so
what
let's
I'm
talk
talking
about the use.
Yes.
Let's talk about the use, right?
Yes.
So Bitcoin itself is a not particularly well-engineered cryptocurrency. It's the most common. It was the first.
Okay.
It's
Yeah,
not
sorry,
particularly well-engineered.
Can you give me 1 second? 1 second. 1 second.
No problem. I see Leanne making lots of comments here, and Leanne is perhaps we can. I'm not sure how long Nassim can stay, but
I'll put my camera on.
okay, all right.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, so you know, Bitcoin is, you know, not particularly well engineered. It happened to be the first. It's the largest cryptocurrency. I mean, you know, one thing. I mean, I know you and I talked about this several years ago. The concept of computational contracts and the idea of kind of autonomous things that can happen in a purely computational domain. That's an example of something for which cryptocurrencies are presumably useful. That is, it's you know, as something where I mean, both the ledger capability of blockchain and the kind of autonomous execution idea of blockchain, and even the transaction concept of blockchain, is something that is useful. If the number of contracts in the world increases by a factor of 1,000, and most of them are purely computational contracts between machines, between AIs in effect, then there's a utility in having this sort of purely computational notion of a currency, I think.
Yes. Okay. But how does that utility enter the valuation?
Well, because then there is a thing for which people find. I mean, if you know, if Bitcoin was the SWIFT network or something, if Bitcoin was a bank network, people would say, "Oh, we want it. We want to use this bank network."
Okay. I mean, we should disentangle the idea that Bitcoin trading at 34,000, okay, and what use we can have of the network built that way. Okay, that can and the fact that it cannot be imitated by other networks or broken. Like, for example, the notion of blockchain requires the thing to be public, distributed, and irreversible. You agree?
Yes.
And people say, "Oh, we're doing blockchain," and you tell them, "Is it irreversible?" Say, "No, we can change it." So it's not blockchain anymore. Is it public? Is it so?
Well, there are non-public versions. I mean, there are permission blockchains, which are a little bit different.
Yes.
But in a first approximation, it's public.
Okay, so what I meant is that there's nice technologies, but I don't understand technology. I understand markets. I understand uses, and I'd rather wait. Given the history of technology, I'd rather wait for something to be used before the hype, rather than hype before the use.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is overhyped. But let me start focusing now on one essential thing, is that I thought that Bitcoin would be a currency. So we're talking Bitcoin now. Okay. But then I realized two things. I realized that gold couldn't be a currency, because to have something priced fixed in a currency, floating in fiat dollars, or what they call fiat, is that then you must have, let's say I want to buy I want to rent an apartment in Bitcoin. For my rent to be in Bitcoin, my income got to be in Bitcoin.
Sure.
So if my income is in Bitcoin, my employer got to have liabilities, matching assets.
Sure.
So
it's got to be Bitcoin all the way down.
It has to be more and more all the way down. But given that government owns so much of GDP and government contract, it's impossible to displace the government.
Well, until a government decides to use Bitcoin as their legal tender.
Exactly. But the problem is, if a government of where, the thing is, everything's so interactive. Like, remember my example of Switzerland and so globalized that we have currency. The volatility between currencies is very low when you have commerce. What we call frictional volatility is about 5 to 7%. From experience, this is the minimum volatility you can have. Okay, so and sometimes it's close to zero, like Hong Kong dollar. By construction, the government compresses, but up to 5% doesn't matter. It's transaction volatility, you see. But so what I meant is, so Bitcoin must have exactly the volatility, all right, of zero or close to frictional, okay, with respect to the US dollar and stuff like that, for it to be adopted. And if anything, the volatility has been increasing over time.
Well, I mean, volatility is measured with respect to dollars. I mean, in other words, at some level, you could say if everybody was using Bitcoin, you would say, oh gosh, dollars are so volatile.
Okay, the numerator that is the least volatile, the way I expressed it is, I take a basket of goods and services, constantly revise, and see what numerator would make that basket least non-volatile.
So why do people not use things like CPI as a medium? I mean,
because you cannot buy and sell CPI, you see, and it's not. It requires dynamic hedging, and effectively, the CPI is pretty much historically the closest thing to a CPI is the dollar. But
there's inflation with respect. I mean,
I know. So inflation compensated by interest rates. You have to net out inflation by interest rates. So people over time have settled for fiat when they're compensated with interest income.
But so you're saying in a perfect world, the currency would track the consumer price index, let's say, but that's
or after interest, and this is pretty much what the Federal Reserve and everybody have done historically. Maybe not now, okay, is try to do that, because when you think about it, and I keep saying that the problem of the CPI is that if you look at the way indices are built, they map quantity changes and price changes. So if you may have a new good that enters it. So for example, I gave the example of the thing that was the most stable in Italy was a gettoni, the telephone token. Was, that basket of goods, they say the in different regions was less volatile in gettoni than it was in the Italian lira, okay? But then the problem is, think about it. Now you have, it says the cost of a phone call, and then price of communication collapsed.
Right, but that's a technology change in changing the goods people want. Now, I mean, you're making the statement that the currency is never going to be technologically obsolete.
Okay, so no, one comment I'm making about tracking the CPI, there are things called inflation index bonds.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is they will not track the CPI. They will track the expectations by the market of the CPI. So for example, you buy them today for a CPI of 3% per annum, and then CPI turns out to be 2%, okay, you're going to lose a lot of money. It's priced in for over this duration what the CPI is going to be. You see, so it's the difference between expectation. So the goods and services trade off of expectation. What I'm saying is I'm obsessed with trying to minimize the effect of inflation on my assets, portfolio, and everything. And so far, I think the best thing is by constructing portfolios that have some short bonds and stuff like that, cocktails of portfolios, I can probably get close, okay? But if I have to close my eyes by one item, in spite of all these hypes about inflation, take the US dollar. And let me tell you why. Let's say you have 3% inflation a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's what the last hour Bitcoin moved. You see, probably.
Maybe. Yeah, right.
So let me check. It's definitely what the lot less than Bitcoin moved today. You see, so yeah. So since we've been speaking, it moved 2% maybe. So you realize that to have that the government has such an edge over us now in controlling prices because they dictate the currencies and they control salaries as well.
Well, in what way? I mean, companies.
And companies do, but I'm saying that when you have a large bulk employer paying you in this currency, you see, it determines the currency. So to switch out of the US dollar into something else is non-trivial. It's much more complicated. And I don't see why the Bitcoin should be it, but not something else.
But so, I mean, as a practical matter, one hears, that there's the whole story of, the Iranian oil traders who can't sell oil for dollars, so they're selling it for Bitcoin instead.
Yes.
And things like that.
Illegal activities. So my argument, I said, if someone gave me criticism for my piece, an economist, he said, illegal activity. I said, yes, but if the currency is just there for illegal activities, okay. So in other words, a currency for fraudsters, ransomware, and pariah, okay, cannot be a currency. It needs to have a bunch of suckers around them trading that currency for it to have a value. Because you can't. I mean, if the Bitcoin is something for hackers and ransomware people and stuff like that, so who will take it off your hand? You see, so to give you fiat or something else against it.
Well, so your argument is, for a currency to work, it has to be a currency for almost everything that people want.
Not for the bulk of what people. What happened is the thing. What in the past you could have double currencies, like bimetallism has prevailed. I looked in history. The problem is when economies become developed, it becomes practically impossible.
Well, so this is your argument.
Sorry?
This is your argument about a single numeraire.
A single numeraire. And let me give you a very simple example. Let's say that you can buy goods at a store and return them, okay? And some people are pricing goods in silver, others are pricing goods in gold.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and I use gold as a numeraire. All right, so I go on days where gold is down.
Sure.
See, I return the merchandise. All right, in silver. So you start arbing people. Like when I say Tesla wanted to price its cars in Bitcoin. So this is great. I buy a car from Tesla in Bitcoin, and I have 30 days to return it. If Bitcoin collapses, you see, I return it. I keep it. And if Bitcoin rises a lot, I go return it and give me my Bitcoin back. You see, so you get arbitrage like hell. You see, so you say, no, we're pricing it in dollars, but you can pay in Bitcoin. So I'm saying, okay, you can pay. I can pay in Swiss franc. It doesn't make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can pay in Apple stock. So the thing cannot be denominated in Bitcoin. So the argument for currency not being there, then you're left with other arguments that of valuation. you know what, it's digital gold. I said, well, it's not digital gold. I mean, you have to settle on what you want it for, you see. Gold didn't become digital gold like because by fiat, people say, oh, this is great, let's have this store of value. It inches its way into the habits of people progressively over centuries till it became a store of value.
Yeah.
So that's the idea. So the best way to view it is to look at what technology is used and go with that, because 99% of technology, it's a Pareto law, 99% of technologies fail.
Yeah.
And it's so far, in 12 years, we haven't done much with this. Maybe there's some resistance. Maybe people love to have a custodian.
Well, I think that look, the technology side of Bitcoin is, my impression is this, what I had imagined would happen is that computational contracts would start becoming big, and that most transactions will be between bots, basically. That most of the contracts that are being executed are between machines. Most of the transactions are between bots. At that point, it's a little weird for bots to be trading in dollars.
Okay, let me go back to state. So the trading is probably done in bots, but the price kernel in the market is invariant to who's trading what. You see, because if bots are not coherent, they get arbitraged.
I understand. So your basic argument, I mean, by the way, this sort of comes back to a physics type story.
Yes.
This is this resonates with a bunch of things about the way reference frames are made in relativity and things like this, that essentially there is your notion of a numeraire that is somehow, flat. This idea that there's no arbitrage is, I think, a notion of saying we're going to define prices to somehow be flat across all these different kinds of places. Because if they're not flat, if there's curvature, you can do this kind of loop around, and that's your arbitrage, I think. And I think that I think there's probably a somewhat deep analogy between kind of what we see in physics and the way that we pick reference frames in physics and so on, and your statement that economies work only if there's a single numeraire.
Not if there's a single numeraire. You can have multiple numeraire, but you cannot have volatility between numeraires. They're arbitrage bounds. We call that arbitrage bounds.
Well, so you mean if there are multiple currencies, but they're pegged together, then
They're
that's
sort of
okay.
like the volatility between them should not be beyond regular transaction cost. You see?
Fair enough.
Because if I go to the grocery store and buy toothpaste, okay, and come back, and then the currency of that grocery store moved by 2%, I'm not going to do the arbitrage. It's not
Right.
worth it.
I have to say, for physicists who are here, this reminds me a lot of coordinate charts. And the correspondence between coordinate charts. That was
In gauge theory to like normalize things so that globally it's sort of invariant to the local decisions.
Yes.
Excellent. I'm sorry because there was a mishap, with the time zone.
I know you probably have to go.
Yeah, I'm going to be yelled at in a few minutes, but.
Okay, well, no, this is very interesting, and
I can continue. I can continue if you want, because I want to talk about things that I think are quite because here you're making me talk about things that I'm not my specialty. I never thought in terms of economics, but I'd like to talk in terms of your what do you call it, the computational irreducibility.
Yes,
Okay.
that's a whole. That's a completely different conversation, which we should have. Maybe we should schedule this for a different time. If you're
whenever I'm around, I would like to talk about this and link it to the fat tails and also to dimensionality problems.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
And finance as well.
Right. I think okay. So people are saying we should do a part 2, and I agree we should do a part 2.
Yeah,
So
part 2 where at least now I know it, because you're putting me on the spot, making me talk about economics. In 37 years in the market, not once did I think in terms of economics.
That's amusing. Okay, so I think we have several actual economists here.
No, but not only that, but I've read books on economics. It goes here, goes out there. Absolutely zero.
All right, do we want to, just for 1 second, I notice we have Leanne here. Does Leanne want to make a few comments in defense of economics here?
Oh, I can't defend economics because economics has so many different schools of thought that are all arguing against each other. But I just wanted to push back a little bit to say that gold also could be considered a fetish, and not have a fundamental value if we ignore the fact that there is a few things it's useful for, but overall it's just some desire.
No, I mean, gold to me may be a fetish. It's not a big deal, but I will still pay something for a fetish, but I would not pay for a fetish that may expire.
Okay, so what do you think about NFTs, Nassim? Because those are, we're thinking about doing a whole bunch of stuff with NFTs because they're fun. You know, we could,
Okay,
for example, we could make an NFT from this conversation.
Let me tell you one thing. Maybe I have no idea. I have no idea. I mean, I don't collect stuff. I have stuff. I have collectible stuff that I don't collect books, but I used to collect Roman heads upstairs. And I'll tell you one thing. I don't understand the thing, but there is, you can see a pattern in how much people pay to collect. They use it with their FU money. So when there's a lot of liquidity, they use a lot of FU money into collectibles. And like now there's a lot of liquidity. People are going to put NFTs and stuff like that. But the minute there's tightness, you see, the rise in Bitcoin is a product of the injection of liquidity last March. I mean, people bought any assets, and now, of course, they're bored in NFT, and tomorrow they'll have SFT, whatever it is, they're going to figure out, you see? So that's fine. I mean, this has some value, maybe for, if you enjoy it and you have satisfaction from it, it has some value. Fetish goods have value. They're not zero. There's an item, like consumer item, stochastic stopping time. But I'm paying for it. Like I would pay $0.01 a year for my gold chain. So it has something. But there's things, but if I know it would disappear, you see, and I don't wear it, that's the problem. Okay, then it's another matter.
Well, so I mean, the contention about cryptocurrencies in part is they have no ultimate real world utility. They are merely an attempt to make a store of value. That's one, that's a necessary claim. I'm not sure that claim is correct. I mean, I think that the whole story of computational contracts and so on is an argument against that claim, although I have to admit that that world has not really taken off yet, and maybe it won't.
Yeah, we'll see, but there's one thing that the one thing I've learned from my years in finance, to always look for a sucker problem. And a sucker problem is when people have a nice story that's coherent, well tied, like they did in the 1990, late 1990s, early 2000 with NASDAQ, and then come up with a story. Oh, the web is going to be wonderful. That's therefore pet.com. And now they tell you inflation, money supply, therefore Bitcoin. Okay.
Okay, but any fundamentals story about a stock is eventually something like that. I mean, you say you should buy, company X, Amazon or something, because they're going to take over from bricks and mortar stores or whatever, or they're going to have bricks and mortar stores.
There's always some kind of expectation of a story for a use, but Amazon, you think eventually they're going to bring some cash flow, and we're going to be able to use that cash flow, to accumulate stuff, or will gain in value from the inside. But
but so the argument has to be that you don't find the story of why Bitcoin, the non-government connected.
No, because Bitcoin is zero sum. You see, in an economy, these things are zero sum in the sense that it's like baseball cards. Okay, they are zero sum. Whereas the Amazon, you can say that it brings. It creates economic activity that enhances economic activity.
Well, I could make the argument that cryptocurrencies make it simpler to do certain kinds of computational contract transactions.
That's fine, but why buy Bitcoin for that? You can start your own crypto that does it, or your own.
Well, just as you can start your own Facebook. I mean, there's a certain network effect that's hard to overcome.
Okay, so yes, but then I would go for other cryptos that should be worth more, like Ethereum.
Okay, as I said, Bitcoin is the first and not the best technology.
Exactly. So eventually, it's like saying that there's a network effect, and people should be using. Remember the Osborne, the first portable computer?
Yeah, I had one of those. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. They typically the first the first people go bust, and then they have everything going for them. Even Apple almost went bust.
Right. No, it is surprising that Bitcoin as the first has also been the largest. That is a surprising thing.
It is a surprise. So I'm sorry because of this time thing,
Yeah,
but I'd love to reschedule and
right, with to be continued. Okay, part 2,
Great.
computational irreducibility, and
risk management and tail risk.
okay, sounds good.
Great. Thanks.
Okay,
Great.
see you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone. Thanks. Bye now. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Part 2 of our discussion with Nassim Taleb, and I think I wanted to talk about kind of the relationship between some of the things that Nassim thinks about risk in the world and how things happen in the world, and some of the things I think about in computational irreducibility and science and so on. And I guess one way that maybe one could think about this is the sort of traditional view of science has been in knowing what will happen in a sort of riskless fashion. If this is the input, science tells us this is what's going to happen. And in a sense, computational irreducibility is the story of the extent to which that is not possible. That is, you might have thought once you have a scientific theory of how the pandemic is going to develop, or how the climate is going to change, or whatever it is, once you have a scientific theory, you're done. You can figure out everything. You can base your behavior on what's being on that sort of scientific knowledge. But one of the things that's come out of science I've done is that that's just not true. That science, in a sense, sort of eats itself from the inside, because even when you know the scientific rules by which something should operate, knowing what's actually going to happen is something that's kind of computationally irreducible, where you can't sort of jump ahead and figure out what's going to happen by any mechanism that's much more efficient than just running each step and seeing what happens. So I'm kind of curious when you think about sort of risk of things, how does this kind of, you can't know what happens as an internal feature of science, how does that relate to kinds of thinking about risk? I mean, I kind of tend to feel that often when you talk about risk, there's a notion of probabilities involved. And in my view of science, I like to think if science is complete, there is nothing left to chance. You are describing everything. And this is, but computational irreducibility says, even when you have the rules to describe everything, you haven't solved the complete problem.
Today I posted an aphorism, a tweet, in which I explained that survival supersedes science. And let me explain why risk management and science are two different professions, so to speak, and why one supersedes the other, because there's a conditioning on you need to survive to do science, you see. So when people think of science, they have this notion that it is a hardwired solution, an answer to problems, and that science is definitive. See, whereas science itself is a mechanism, it's a process, not an answer. It's a process by which you have the closest thing we know to the truth. That's pretty much the most coherent and the most and the story that has the least amount of holes in it for the time being.
You mean as a definition of science?
As it's a methodology. Science is a methodology. Right? I mean, the definition of science, if you go literally, it means to know, which is not quite how it's done. It's done, and the Popperian view of science, which philosophers liked and now no longer like, all right, is that science is fundamentally incomplete, and you're adding something, and it must have holes in it so we know where it doesn't work and update progressively based on that. So that's my understanding of science, is that we know, just as we know more today than we did 10 years ago, or definitely, I don't know, 20 years ago, we'll know a lot more in 20 years. So therefore, it's not complete, nothing is closed, it's not settled.
I would slightly take issue with that epistemological point of view. I think that science has traditionally been along the lines of, we'll make this model for how the world works. Our model is not complete. Therefore, over time, we'll learn more that will allow us to add more stuff to the model. However, there is one exception. If we have a fundamental model for physics, we can potentially have a model which just nails it. It's like, this is how the universe works. there is a model and it is the universe. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is we end up with this computational irreducibility phenomenon. So even when we have this complete model, we can't necessarily know what will happen. But I think it isn't correct to say that science is fundamentally incomplete. There is a form of science that is.
Okay, so I see. So you're telling me that there exists a science that has captured everything in its field, and it is settled and definitive.
I'm saying that I think there's this one case. I mean, it's the one little footnote to the usual story of science. The one footnote is, except in the case of the fundamental theory of physics, because that's the case where it is conceivable, and we think we've actually managed to get a framework for doing it, that we can actually know that we're done. We know the foundation. Now, it's not relevant to everyday life. It's completely irrelevant to everyday life. But in terms of the kind of conceptual epistemology of science.
Okay, so let's assume it's an exception, or
right,
the ideal that will converge to, that we have converged in one domain. Either it's the exception or maybe the rule, because we'll converge in anything to that, but we don't, but not yet, as you can say. All right, so that's the idea. So but still, I thought there'd be this caveat that even when you think you have a theory of everything, all right, you should always be open to some revision, because you have no idea whether that framework is the right one. I mean, there must.
Well, that's the theory of miracles.
Epsilon probability. Sorry.
That's the theory of miracles. I mean, that is the universe governed by definite laws, or are there occasionally miracles that go outside of those laws? I mean, I think that this is, the level of description. Okay, so this whole question about whether it's possible to have a theory of everything at the level of fundamental physics, I think is irrelevant to everyday discussions of risk and how people lead their lives. I think from the point of view of the fundamental epistemology of science, it can be important, but I think it's irrelevant to the sort of the everyday theories about, trading stocks or figuring out about pandemics or anything like that. So I think we can put it aside. We can discuss it. It's an interesting topic.
Okay. So it'd be very interesting to wonder whether it is. You can state that this is complete, but within the system. But that's another, that's another problem. So I'm saying, so to go back to this representation of science as a methodology that's supposed to get you somewhere. And we let's assume that it's incomplete in most domains, with some exceptions, maybe your exceptions. Okay, that the problem of risk management is that you don't need to understand the process, okay, before to take action, because understanding may come too late. So therefore, I have the sort of like the guiding principle of the incerto. Is that if I have uncertainty, it's easier to make a decision.
Okay.
Under uncertainty than under certainty. This water, for example, I'm uncertain about, let's assume that I give you a glass of water, I tell you I'm uncertain about the purity of the water. What would you do?
I don't know. Smell the water, see whether it smells disgusting.
So the first thing, you would say no. Okay, you'd say I want this other glass of water. No?
There's a choice, yeah.
Okay, so the idea is there's uncertainty about the water. I won't drink from it. Okay, I'll drink from something else. Okay, I have uncertainty. The example I keep giving is I have uncertainty about the skills of the pilot. Someone tells me we're not sure about the pilot's skills. I get off the plane. You see, I take another plane, or I drive, or I swim, or do whatever. Okay, so the whole idea that the incerto, behind the incerto, is how to make decisions under uncertainty, and it's actually very easy to make decisions under uncertainty. Okay, so now comes the idea.
If all doors lead to uncertainty, so there's doors A, B, and C, they're all uncertain.
Yes.
Then what do you do?
If I'm uncertain about then you randomize. If you have no other option, but it depends. If it's to have fun, I'd go for the most uncertain. You see, if it's to have to protect my life because I could be poisoned, or I could have a problem that terminates. So this is where I rank risk management. Okay, I have layers. Okay, where the first thing is you want to survive, because there are mistakes you don't recover from.
Uh-huh.
So whatever strategy you do, it needs to ensure not just your survival, but the survival of your species. Okay, so you want to avoid that worst case scenario. And when I ask people, what is your worst case scenario? If they train in economics, the first answer is my death.
Okay.
And then when I answer, no, that's not your death. There got to be a layer above you. Do you own pets? So what's worse, you die or you die plus your loved ones, your pets, your loved one, your neighbor, everybody, and humanity dies. So there are layers that are worse than your death. Okay, so we need to protect. Hence, they have precautionary measures to protect important layers that don't have expiration time from disappearing. Okay, or don't have a reasonable expiration time. Like, for example, humanity is not supposed to have an expiration time. I have an expiration time.
Well,
So,
I mean, it
so
depends
that-
who you are, right? I mean, there are people who say, humanity is destroying the planet. The planet is important to preserve.
okay, there's a balance here, because if we destroy the planet, then we won't survive as well. So sometimes you have full discussions attending them. So I'm trying to say, to make the difference between risk management and science. We've survived thanks to paranoia for hundreds of millions of years, however you define our species, okay? And we didn't have science, and our intention is to survive, and we have the right instinct to survive. And if you look at how a cat behaves, it has the right instinct to survive. So I say that risk management, surviving supersedes science. Or as Warren Buffett says it, in order to make money, you must first survive. It's not like you play Russian roulette, okay? You die, and then later on, you're gonna have a good run, okay? You're absorbed. There's an absorbing barrier you want to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
So that absorbing barrier is central for us, and it has layers of absorbing barriers. Me, my species, humanity, stuff like that.
The universe, for example.
The universe, whatever it is. I don't want to destroy the planet, okay? So because it's not supposed to have an expiration time. So anyway, so this is risk management, and why it's more important than knowledge, okay? Because our knowledge is fundamentally incomplete, except in cases like yours that are either inapplicable or rare, okay, or both. In this case, you have it's incomplete. So we assume that it's incomplete, and we agree on that without any further philosophical disagreement. Philosophical back and forth. We agree that if it's incomplete, science is incomplete. I must survive, and I'm not going to wait for science to be completed before making a decision. Okay. So the mechanism for risk management becomes very different from scientific mechanism.
It depends what you mean by science. I mean,
okay,
there's science, but I think let's come back to the question of the definition of science and what science really is and what science claims to be able to do. I mean, let me say that in the world, as the world is using science, it is overusing and abusing science.
Okay, I agree, because I've used this argument before by saying you're doing scientism, not science. Okay, but to make my argument stronger, I say even if we do science properly, it's not making claims about these things.
About what? So what's an example?
It's not making claim about completeness. Okay, for example, we don't understand
everything about viruses and the immunology of viruses.
For example, when the virus hit, okay, we knew that, but there's things we know from science, okay, that it's a fat tail process.
Well, we think we know things from science. I mean, that's one of the issues, is how we know what we know.
Okay, so there is a judge, okay, telling you how you trust your trustee, and there's someone trusts the trustee, the custodian of the custodian, if you wish. We have that in ranking statistical distributions.
But we don't have that in science. I mean, in science, knowing.
But science is, if you notice, is that there's empirical science, and empirical science outside physics, where the variance of results is so small as to be deemed deterministic, you see. We have most other, what we call science, like medicine, is entirely statistical.
It's a strange kind of science.
Okay, so it is statistical where you have these p-values, you have these notions that depend on understanding probability distributions and canned probability distribution. In the previous session, for those who are not here, we showed how the law of large numbers and the central limit theorem are the backbone of all these methodologies, and why they don't hold in some domain, or they don't hold in some domain in ways that you think they hold.
And medicine is particularly bad offender in that regard. I mean, medicine is
psychology, economics.
Right, but I mean, medicine, it is implicitly assumed, everything is assumed to be a Gaussian, and it's not true, and it's a big mess.
Okay, but in medicine, there's something worse even, that the misunderstanding of the mechanism of science, we're digressing into it, but to explain the following, that when you do evidence-based science, you're making claims about an aggregate. You're not making claims about individuals.
Yep.
And a lot of people don't get that the claims made about an aggregate hold for an aggregate, not for individuals. So even medicine is largely Gaussian, actually. The problem is not there with medicine. The problem is p-values.
Well, wait a second. There's several different points. I mean, so first of all, the question is, it's a good thing to look in Wolfram alpha at the distributions of results from blood tests. Okay. Yeah. So some of them are nice and Gaussian. Human heights are roughly Gaussian distributed. Human weights are not. They're log normal. Human
height technically is log normal. Anything that's bounded at 0 would be sort of like log normal, but it's log normal low various.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. But it's a pretty good approximation to a Gaussian.
Yes.
But there are plenty of blood test results that have nothing to do with Gaussian distributions. They're really very different.
Yes. But I mean, we're digressing into but let me make a point about that, and I'm not worried about that, because in medicine, very often you're looking at decisions that are Gaussianized. And to give you an example, if to give you a very simple example, the patient is going to die or not die. Okay, we're not dealing with an unknown number of patients who may die. When you go to that, it becomes tail risk, and this is where pandemics enter the game. And pandemics are patently not Gaussian. It has an effect. Whereas in medicine, if blood test results are not Gaussian, okay, the impact will be Gaussian or be bounded to one person. Therefore, you re-enter thin tail distribution somehow. And that was in a paper, and actually in the Black Swan, I said that individuals, all right, whatever you do to an individual or is confined to an individual can be approximated with a Gaussian for decision. Okay, but once you have collectives, okay, then it becomes a non-Gaussian. For in a medical field, like you're go ahead.
No, I mean, one of the issues with medicine is we're all different, and we're all, and medicine and medical tests and medical statistics are based on this idea that somehow it is like physics, where you can do that quantum experiment and, the electron will always be the same electron, but humans are all different. And that means that
exactly my point. That's exactly the point I'm trying. Exactly my point. Where the problem of in a lot of things, in IQ tests, and a lot of things, where people start mixing groups and individuals. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, for example, if I want to know something about attributes of individuals, okay, I may be inspired by results from a collective, but they may not necessarily apply. To give you an idea, if we start, because a collective is more abstract than individual. To give you a very simple example, if I take the average human, then the average human must have one breast, all right, and one testicle, on average, or maybe a little less because of So we cannot generalize. And that's Quetelet's problem that I discuss. There's some discussion about it in the Black Swan. It's trying to get norms in flowing from the general to the particular rather than going from particular to the general. You see?
But I think this idea that, there are certain situations in which taking statistical averages makes sense. Taking an average, as in a mean, for example, taking the numbers, 2, 1, 0, whatever, makes sense. There are others where it doesn't make sense at all. Even in physics, there are places where that doesn't make sense. And I think that that's a particularly simplistic way of combining things, is just saying, we've got these numbers, let's add them together, let's take the average. I mean, it's there are plenty of places where, in physics, for example, there lots of things are quantized. You could say, well, on average, the we've got this laser or something that's got we could say the average energy is this, but nothing is at that energy. It's because there's these two different quantized levels. I mean, it's the same kind of thing as you were describing for humans. I mean, there's
exactly. So we can use averages for some properties, okay? But the problem is a lot of people have the feeling that it's more scientific. It's more scientific to ignore clinical experience and clinical results as they apply to an individual.
Right.
And in fact, it's not, because when I look at, they don't even understand their own statistics. That statistics only are making claims on aggregates.
For sure.
So if I treat the aggregates as one patient, this is what we got to give them. Like I had this experience when I had COVID. And they ran a clinical trial in the UK that was very formal, and discovered that they had that you must give steroids in 6 milligrams dosage. Okay, so I read the thing, and I started calling up doctors. They said, well, that's a clinical trial. We know that works. I said, okay, I weigh 220 pounds. Okay. You have 145,
people in the sample.
In a sample for 145. Okay. So there got to be some variation. That's the first one. And two, got to be something idiosyncratic, age and stuff like that, that you can increase the dosage. And I realized that, for example, why my situation was different from the aggregate. Okay, I was in Lebanon on the third floor of my house with no contact with anyone. Everything, food is coming via an elevator. All right, so therefore I had absolutely not the same risk class as others. And the reason they lower the dosage is because of hospital viruses. You see, so when you start going into particulars, okay, you can use general results and fix them to particulars. You see. And also, I mean, I didn't tell you about when I talk about racism, for example. Racism is the same problem. All right, let's assume.
Let's talk about that, but let's finish on medicine for a second, because I think there are interesting points to make. I mean, so one question is, the current practice of medicine is all about statistics. It's all about, we've done this trial, this happens, that happens. What's the alternative view of medicine? An alternative view of medicine is to have a theory, but medicine is extremely allergic to theories. That is, you could say, if you should take steroids because we have this model that shows how steroids are absorbed in the lungs and it produces this and it does that. Medicine has been a field, unlike physics, for example, which has had a great time with theories. Medicine has decided that theories are doomed. That is, because the alternative to saying, let's just follow what the statistical averages say, would be to say, we have a model for Nassim's lungs or something. And we're going to say, based on that model, we're going to work out that he should have 2 milligrams of steroids and, or 8 milligrams of steroids or whatever it is. But that's a thing that is even more, that's a thing for whatever reason. And I think it's a sort of society of science type reason is very, people have gotten the idea that there is no theory for biology. There's no theory for medicine, and there can't be a theory. And people say, for example, in biology, they say, and they're wrong, by the way, but they say there can't be a theory because everything is just the result of natural selection. So in other words, that the way we are is because of a bunch of historical accidents. I mean, I should be curious what your point of view is. Like,
the only thing I understand is how people make a mistake going from general to particular.
Right.
See? Or from a particular to the general. And I gave the example of racism because it's very similar. Like, for example, if you want to make a decision on who to hire to run a marathon, right? Do you say, okay, I'm going to interview someone who runs marathons? Or you're going to say, okay, I'm going to find me an Ethiopian who's born, from this tribe, okay? No, I'm going to find someone who's going to run the marathon. You don't take whatever physical characteristics of a group and then try to flow from that. You use different criteria, okay? So the mistake of evidence-based medicine is that they often make the mistake of saying, okay, let's bring an Ethiopian to run a marathon, or let's bring a Swede to lift, sorry, a Bulgarian to lift weight, all right? Because statistically, Bulgarians are better at deadlifts, whatever it is, okay? So let's go bring a Bulgarian. No, I mean, you don't have to go call up the Bulgarian consulate, all right? You go to the gym. So that's the idea that of sometimes you use the wrong general.
Right.
So
But
this is general. So particularizing the general is a mistake that is made in medicine. In your case, you're saying, okay, we may have a central model, okay, and they're allergic to what in economics they call structural form versus reduced form. That medicine doesn't mind reduced form, but they're allergic to a more general form, and that is because of the heritage of medicine, historically, because of the problem of the two branches of medicine. That there was techne and episteme. There were the barbers who became surgeons, and they were lower class people, and they had a lot of knowledge, and then often they're called even empirics because it was not considered good, and the rest was dealt with by theologians who would sit down and there's a nice anecdote. The mother of Louis XIV died of breast cancer. Not a single doctor saw her.
that's
It was
interesting.
just by theories. They're cured by you see the idea. So this is why the history of medicine, okay, and the reason we're alive today is because it was taken over by the barbers and the surgeons, who were lower class people working with their hands, unlike the bishops and the upper class philosophers who thought that they were running the field. And the field today is a compromise, but effectively, if you see how it's taught, it's a pseudo story, because they put you through medical school, they make you study I don't know, molecular biology, molecular chemistry, or molecular biology, and organic chemistry, and all kind of stuff, and then tell you forget about everything. Now you're in a hospital, and this is where you start learning.
Yeah.
So it is still run by the model apprenticeship, in the model of it's like you learn carpentry or something like that.
I mean, it's a complicated issue. I mean, this whole education thing, and, is it worth doctors learning calculus? And, one of my observations about medical folk is most doctors can read a graph. Many fewer can read histograms. Many fewer of even quite respectable practicing doctors. No, but, should doctors learn calculus? That becomes a sort of societal question of what do you want the sort of threshold of kind of ability to learn things and so on to be, to say, okay, this person's going to be a doctor. So I think it's but this idea that everything is just based on kind of case law, so to speak. Everything is based on what you've seen before, and that's sort of one approach, which is probably not bad. And then the more scientific overlay on that is the statistical approach of saying, we'll do this because evidence-based medicine says the p-value of this is such and such.
Yes. So let's talk about the statistical approach to medicine. It's a mess, because what happened is, unless you have Mathematica, I'm not doing this to praise Mathematica, but I do Monte Carlos about what you get. You don't have a feel for what you're doing. You see, these people take like recipes. This is a p-value, and I wrote a paper that it was like accepted in a journal, provided I simplify it. I say, fuck you, I'm not simplifying it, because it's simple enough. They couldn't get that p-value is a random variable. If I have an ensemble and it has one property, the p-value, that say the true p-value is 0.12, it means that you repeat the same experiment and you get long-term distribution around 0.12. 53% of the observation will be below 0.05.
Okay.
So it means you can get a 0.01 by repeating 2 or 3 times the experiment, okay, with the same, knowing the p-value is 0.12. So therefore, they don't get that p-value is stochastic. So the idea is that my war in economics and elsewhere is with people who use a statistical concept without figuring them out themselves. If you haven't derived it yourself by getting a feel what is, like as we did last time with the law of large numbers. Mm-hmm. You don't talk about law of large numbers unless you've tried it and seen the result. you see. So we classify people between what I call the probability-driven statistician and what I call the cookbook statistician. They take a cookbook, they give you, this is the statistic, we're going to do this, okay? So in finance, we have horror stories with people using the Gaussian. All right, but tell you, oh, it's not Gaussian, but then they use a variance, which only works if it's Gaussian. It's Gaussian. It's a metric that doesn't have information elsewhere, or correlation that only has information if the relationship is linear. You see?
Well,
yeah, go ahead. So I mean, it applies to medicine. To give you 2 or 3 examples, I have a medical blog. I don't know if you know. I have a medical errors, on statistical errors in medicine, and I did that to kill time. Where they sometimes someone was talking about the golden ratio by using the blood pressure of individual. The ratio of blood pressure of systolic to diastolic supposedly should be 1.6 what, one something that the
120 over 80 or something. What is 120 over 80?
No, it's not 120 over 80. It's something else.
Well, they've changed it now.
It should be the golden ratio, all right? 1.61 something, and but the problem is it took the average systolic divided by the average diastolic, rather than taking the average systolic over diastolic across the population. All right, so you know they got problems with that elementary thing we spoke about last time, a function of an average, not average of a function. You see, and you can recurse. If I had to just focus on one point for the rest of my life, the function of an average of, or the moments of an average is not the moments of a function are not the function of the moment.
Look, I think
yes.
The base problem is medicine wants to have the authority of science. It needs to find a way to do that. It goes to statistics to get that. The idea that medicine is a case-based business where it's just like, oh, I've seen a case like that before, this is what we should do. That's what in practice better practitioners end up doing. The alternative would be, let's have a good model of the human body, and let's figure out by theory what should happen in this or that case. And people have accepted defeat on that approach and don't think it can possibly work. And so instead, they're searching for sort of scientific certainty, and they think they find that in the statistics of clinical trials and things like this. And I think that's, the problem is people believe in science, and people have a largely religious at this point belief in certain aspects of science. And that's been, that is reflected, for example, in people's need, I think, to say, the medical result is, the evidence-based medicine result is, because they want something definite. And that's the place to get something definite.
At the risk of really destroying many more fields, okay, I think there's a rule. If you need a p-value, or if you need a statistical result, not a sign. Okay?
Yes.
Because, and that applies to psychology is a lot worse, okay? Because psychology is a lot more bullshit, and they have longer papers and fewer results and no surgeons and stuff. And so psychology, medicine, economics, oh my God, all right, and the fields, like financial economics, subfields, entrepreneurship, all that bullshit. So they have, whenever you need statistics to drill a point.
I agree.
Okay,
I made this point myself.
That it's not a science. Now there are some cases where you can do it properly by saying, okay, I'm making claims about an aggregate, and I can see stuff. All right, they are case, but most of the population of practitioners or researchers, they don't get it right, and we know from I mean, and also the problem is. There are areas that are in fact non-Gaussian. So to tell you that the rule is N of 1, it's a clinical consideration where you have a doctor, patient, is clinical. You need to know medicine. N of 100, it becomes a statistical problem. N of humanity with pandemic, it's a tail risk problem. And the 3 are 3 different disciplines.
Yeah. Well, look,
and the results you get from N of 100, assuming it's may not flow down or up. It definitely don't flow up.
Look, my point of view is anytime when you need to use fancy statistics like p-values to tease out a conclusion, the conclusion is deeply suspect. I mean, the fact is, people invented all that stuff in the 1930s and so on, when they were doing, agricultural statistics and things like this, where it was hard to get a lot of data. In many fields today, it's easy to get tons and tons of data. And you see in lots of things I do, for example, you can just see, okay, it's not clear what's going on, just get more data. And then you plot this graph and you can see the whole thing is clustered in one corner or another corner, and you can make a definite conclusion. I think the issue in medicine, one of the problems is that this idea of clustering things, I mean, it's deeply flawed, because people are so different. There are, when you do some clinical trial, you're aggregating together, as your example of steroid dosing and so on indicates, you're aggregating together all these things which may, for theoretical reasons, have utterly different results. But you're just putting them together and you're saying, we'll use statistics, which somehow is some scientifically magical thing to tease out an answer.
But I have one point in defense of one methodology, okay, and I don't know if you've heard about the hydrochloroquine stories with people clustering.
Yep.
They vote Trump, they like hydrochloroquine, stuff like that. And the beauty of having the control group, okay, would have a placebo or not placebo. It doesn't have to be placebo, but having a proper control group, randomly selected individual, you give them a drug for it or so on. That you notice that hospitals, where hydrochloroquine was successful, have a lower mortality rate, effectively had populations that were younger.
Okay.
And your rate of death from COVID doubles every 10 years, approximately, beyond the age of 50. So you realize if you have a 10-year younger population, you're going to have the death rate.
Right.
So, and you can even shoot for younger, as someone I won't mention did. So therefore, their methodology of double blind, or not necessarily it has to be double blind, but the randomized control trial, is that you take a population and you want it to be as close, okay, the population that has the medication to be as close to the population that doesn't have it. So you can see an effect without all these things. So there are some tricks that they do that have value, of course. It's just that the results that they get, okay, designed for the general, you need to retranslate back from the general to the particular.
Well, there are many other problems with clinical trials. I mean, the whole technology of who do you have in a clinical trial is a very bizarre business, because there's a lot of, you don't qualify for the clinical trial because, well, actually we think the drug is not going to work on you for this or that reason. I'm sure this happens. Analogous things happen in plenty of finance situations. We won't have you in this clinical trial because you don't qualify for this reason, which is in fact a proxy for the clinical trial is going to fail on you. I mean, I think the interesting case for clinical trials is genuinely personalized medicine. How do you deal with that? Is there any statistical way to deal with that? In other words, if you say, everybody is different, everybody has a different genome sequence, it's going to depend on some unknown aspect of the genome sequence, what happens. Now you could say, well, it seems difficult to maintain this idea that everything is based on statistics if you are actually recognizing the fact that people have an immense diversity of different medical characteristics.
This I agree fully with you, and it's the problem that needs to be solved outside that Fisher, all these theories that came out of the bad statistical methods. They came from heuristic statistics rather than understanding the fundamental probability thing, and they have their heuristic, right? Like if it's n of 30, then it's Gaussian, therefore this, and a lot of mistakes. And I see even further mistakes, like for example, correlation. Correlation is a metric that has no meaning, all right, outside linear relationships.
Mhm.
And I have a paper called "Fooled by Correlation" on on the web, waiting to be fixed. And that "Fooled by Correlation" paper is supposed to show a bunch of things, like, for example, a lot of paradoxes that people don't know. Okay, that it's not transitive, and the mistakes are made usually by psychologists. Because in medicine is gold compared to social science. Social science is a mess. It's a complete mess.
Well, one of the things you say that, but one of the things I've noticed is if you look at things like statistics of people visiting websites, okay, and you look at the detailed behavior of people when they visit a website, one thing that I've been really struck by is you look at curves for, the time interval between people clicking this and clicking that and so on. They are wonderfully smooth and quite tight curves. In other words, there are some principles of human behavior which we don't happen to know, but which are surprisingly predictable. So in other words, you might have thought psychology, things like that, will just be a mess because nothing is predictable. I think that's not true. I think we don't know how to predict it, but I don't think it's true that there's nothing there, that there's no possibility of a kind of Newtonian science of those kinds of things. I think there can be, we just don't know what it is.
Maybe I have a little a statement, nasty statement in Skin in the Game, where I explained two things. I said, anything you hear about statistics that works, that is not bullshit. Okay, you can find it. You should find it in Erasmus, who compiled the classics about 500 years ago. All right. So if you don't find it in Erasmus, it doesn't exist. So once a statistician jumped on, one psychologist jumped at me and said, "You idiot! Cognitive dissonance. All right, that's a new concept. It didn't exist." I said, you can find it. Erasmus, because he's a portal to the classics, or Montaigne or someone. Of course, you find it. It's the sour grapes.
Yeah. Well,
which
right.
way precedes the Greeks, because a lot of these Greeks, fables existed already with the Assyrians.
I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me.
Like I found a bunch of them in Assyrian texts that precede the Greeks by about 800, 900 years, and they're not that well known because it's a narrow field seriology.
It's an interesting fact that human nature has not changed throughout recorded history.
So our ancestors know so much more in that field. You see, they may not know physics, but they know a lot about things. So I said, whatever is not there, okay, odds are it's bullshit. And as we know, there's all these tricks that psychologists try to figure out about humans. The other statement I said, if it's not in Erasmus explicitly, or it must be known by used car salespeople. All right, and effectively, all these Richard Thaler theories and stuff like that were well known by advertising agencies. How to manipulate people, and it's known. And the third category of people who know it, so it said Erasmus, used car people, and magicians. Magicians had long before them known about all these optical illusions and illusions that you can have attentive, all these things that psychologists know. So basically, some fields have brought nothing to our knowledge of human nature, if not a degradation, because they give us about 55% of the papers don't replicate.
Well, right, but one of the questions is, science. We were starting off talking about science and what science could do, and there's a certain model for what kind of a thing science can do. And there's a question when it comes to psychology, for example, are there things of a kind which science, as we currently imagine science, can do or not? And is it, is psychology kind of a thing, could there be a Newtonian type theory of psychology, which we just don't happen to know what it is? For example, or to take a simpler case probably is immunology. We actually are very ignorant about how immunology works. And, there could perfectly well be kind of a Newtonian-like theory of that. We just don't happen to know what it is yet. And there are other things where I suspect there fundamentally can't be a Newtonian-like theory of those areas. I mean, I think that what?
To have a theory, I mean, to go back to what you call Newtonian theory, if I understand, let me rephrase it so I understand it. Okay, that's the way I understand anything. Newtonian theory means that you don't have to catalog or describe every apple falling from every tree. Okay,
Yes.
particulars. I can have a general model by which I know how apples fall and reapply it to how apples fall.
Yes.
They all must fall under the same, equation. They all must fall the same way.
Right.
That's what you call Newtonian theory. Okay.
Yes.
And that's exactly the mistake that people are making. They think they have Newtonian theory or they have a evidence-based thing.
Yes. And they don't.
Because they're taking the average apples, whereas Newtonian theory applies to every single apple. You see.
Right. But notice.
Yeah.
Right. But notice an important point. One of the things that physics has achieved is it's built these pretty big towers of theories. That is, you start off from some underlying set of principles, and you build this whole tower of this follows from this follows from this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mathematics has probably built the tallest such towers, but physics has built fairly tall towers. In medicine, I don't think they build towers. If they did, they would all fall down. And what you're describing, this function of an average of a function, and so on, that's the lowest level effort to build a tower, and it will collapse. I mean, in other words, you could say, that's a difference between a kind of science where you can build a tower and a kind of science where you have one, fact result, but you can't build on top of it. And probably some of the errors you're describing are attempts to build on this kind of sand-based foundation that you get from taking essentially the statistical results in medicine.
Yeah, I would add one thing to your thing, that the difference between explicit knowledge, right, which is easy to grasp, and more, I would say fuzzy, but you know it, but you can't phrase it very well because it's more complicated to be expressed, but you understand sort of how it behaves. So the Newtonian physics is an explicit theory.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have fields where you have what we call experience, which is not an experience theory, but a general way of identifying how apples fall and knowing which one is going to hurt itself and stuff like that. So it's more of what's called techne versus episteme.
Which means what?
Techne, episteme. Techne is
knowledge of the art.
One is not easy to put down in neat form. The other one is explicit. So explicit versus tacit, or explicit versus a little more complicated.
Well, so you might say experience-based versus theory-based.
Exactly. So the problem I had was statistician is to explain that there is something called clinical experience, which doesn't generalize, and it's like you're not making claims about general, you're making claims about particulars, and they don't have a name for it. They don't think it exists, so they say, well, either we have theory or empirical, branches. Okay, and I'm trying to explain there's a clinical one, which is very robust, and what saved medicine so far is a clinical approach, not the empirical approach. You see, and medicine has no theoretical approach, although they claim to have one. All right, they have a so-called empirical approach, evidence-based, that works sometimes, but not really. All right, you have to know how to fudge it. And then they have a third one, which is a clinical approach. And I know from a clinical approach, a good clinician would look at a patient, oh my God, well, the patient doesn't open her or his mouth, and they immediately take the person to the emergency room, and the person's having a heart attack, right? The person doesn't know it, okay? They look and they see the sign, and that's clinical experience.
Right.
50, 60 years of practicing. So, but if you look at the textbooks in medicine, and I'm talking about from the textbook from, the big main ones, the one taught in Europe till recently, because I was interested in texts written in Semitic languages, but by the Persian, of course, Avicenna, or by Maimonides, right? Maimonides.
I didn't know he wrote a medical textbook. Maimonides.
I have a text of medical aphorisms, and he wrote in Arabic, and actually his name, they say bin Maimun. His name is Ibn Ubaidullah. That was his name, and he wrote in Arabic, right? And he has, and he constantly referred to certain Jalinos. Jalinos mean gallon. So the success. So Maimonides, and you look at, and it's all theory. If this happens, and the humor like this, and this happened like that, then this must happen, and then you have to apply cold, right? So they're trying to make these little theoretical, I mean, these hard statements, right? So someone can read the book, but in fact, it doesn't work that way. People learn from seeing patients.
Well, I mean,
And developing experience.
What you're describing, and I'm curious actually to what extent I haven't looked at Galen in a very, very long time, and I had no idea that
Galen dominated. Galen actually was lost in Greek text, and it was recovered in Syria. It was very present in Syriac text, because in the ancient world, the Syriacs were the doctors. All right, the Chaldeans were the stars.
Astrologers.
Sorry.
The Chaldeans were the astrologers. You
The
go to the
astrologers
Chaldeans.
and Syriacs, and they both wrote in Semitic language derived from Babylonian, from Semitic languages. I think a lot of the text came from Aramaic, the Syrian Aramaic, the Syrian dialect of Aramaic, the Syriac, called Syriac, and then it'll translate into Arabic. Some translate into Arabic directly, some taken up by a person like Maimonides referring to them. I have right upstairs, but I can give you a sample. It's so funny. It's hilarious.
Well, how similar is it to in current current clinical practice? There are these books that basically say, if you see these symptoms, this is the decision tree for what must be going on. This is what you should do. How similar are those modern ones?
They are similar, except they didn't have what they call evidence at the time, controlled experiment. So just based on impression. And if you see this, do that. Yes, very similar.
Well, how much worse were they than I mean, how much has apart from drugs, which are a whole different story, because drugs have a quite different, elaborate chemistry that didn't exist back in those days. Most of it didn't.
I mean, the drugs existed a lot. They have the recipes for drugs, enormous recipes for drugs.
Yeah, right. And they had all these plant, these things that said, look at a plant with these kinds of leaves and use it for this.
Okay, so the way I'm gonna find the similarities is that we had knowledge in a lot of domains in the ancient past. Mm-hmm. Some domains our knowledge wasn't great, but it helped us survive. Okay, in medicine, and the surgery was good. Okay, because you could see the results. There was very little bullshit, and it was in Europe it was a different path from the other one.
They didn't have anesthesia, which was kind of a bad thing.
It didn't have anesthesia, but they still saved lives, right? And did things. And then they had alcohol, and then they knock you out or something. They had ways, all right. So, and then the other the branch that we should look at that was monstrously successful, and a catalog and Anti-Fragile, how it preceded knowledge in it, preceded science, or techne preceded episteme, is engineering. The Romans had phenomenally, and we had recipes then that definitely were vastly more effective than medicine, okay? Because it's an easier field, you would say, less complex. Mm-hmm. And in engineering, and they had self-reinforcing concrete that under stress gets stronger. And recipes we have lost completely. And then the other thing, the interesting thing, just to say that perhaps they were saved from theory, okay, is that I have a tableau of, I call it teaching birds how to fly. Like teaching birds how to fly means, whether it's, the field comes from academia and the practice follows, because if you read a, Wikipedia entry, or I don't know today's Wikipedia entry, what it is, but you see that technology is seen as something that's application of science to practical affairs, where in fact I have a different, route in mind. That practice leads to technology, which leads to science. And later on, those who write the books are the scientists. So to take the very simple case of engineering, right? They were building cathedrals. They were building using heuristics.
Right.
10 people in Europe at the time they were building knew Euclidean geometry, and they used it as mind puzzles.
Sure.
Okay, so the idea of of science driving these fields. So there's a field vastly more interesting, but it's not statistical engineering. That is entirely clinical. I say clinical, empirical, and theoretical. Okay, that's entirely clinical, and people forget that this must be a model for a lot of other fields.
I think it's interesting that, what you say about engineering didn't get written down. I mean, the science, the abstract science, people wrote books about it and the books were passed down. In engineering, the sort of engineering manuals, maybe of the Freemasons or whoever, didn't, those things didn't get passed down. The same thing's happening with software engineering. There isn't, the artifacts of software engineering aren't particularly preserved relative to theoretical works on those kinds of things. But I think, your point about the, I think there are also cases where the science has preceded the technology, where in order to do the technology, you need a certain amount of science. I think in, there are certainly examples.
Like which example?
What's that?
Like which example right now?
Take rockets. They're a good example. You need to understand Newton's
Okay,
third law.
I have a very interesting story for rockets. The jet engine.
Yes.
I have a bunch of text here on the jet engine. I discovered one day I was talking about the Black-Scholes formula at the London School of Economics.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling them this, and we had a vastly more sophisticated formula for 200 years, and this is how we did prices. And then the minute someone started using the Gaussian distribution, our knowledge degraded. Okay. And so I give him the story. A fellow told me, but of course you have the story of the jet engine. You don't know it? I said, what? I said, yeah. For a long time, the jet engine, the theory came later.
Yeah. No, it's sure. It's like the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers were, what needed to be invented there was not a theory of aerodynamics. It was what you might think of as engineering common sense about control surfaces and so on. But I think it's I'm not quite sure. One of the points about science, what is science and what do people think science can do? For some people, science is what happened in the sort of Newtonian type period of writing down formulas, figuring things out from formulas and so on. And we, for example, that's the thing to which medicine, for example, is quite allergic. Medicine doesn't think there are formulas.
I'm glad they are allergic to that for one reason, because unless you do it right, with no error, why is it that you guys don't use no p-value? Because when I compute p-values in physics, I get 10 to the minus 15, which is basically variation in the experiment, not variation in the process.
Well, a great example of epidemiology and the success or lack thereof of epidemic predictions was an interesting case, because a lot of people said, we've got this scientific epidemiology model, it's going to predict all these things, let's make decisions based on these models. And it turns out the models were wrong. It wasn't surprising the models were wrong, because
But we wrote a paper saying it's called On the Error of Making a Single Point Estimate when you have a probability distribution, you see. So the error is made by, and I said the error had been made by two people, by the people who wrote these models making a prediction, all right? Because it's a distribution that has so much variance, you can't make a single prediction. You describe what can happen, and it's fat-tailed, okay? And the second, so therefore you don't observe the average, you see, you observe realization, not the average. And the second error is made by those who criticize them, by saying, oh, your projections didn't play out, you see. So both were wrong. So we wrote a paper called on, it was a fight we had. It started with a Twitter, comment, which degenerated into a paper with my colleagues. We have discovered that the fattest tailed random variable on the planet is by far pandemics. And you take 500 pandemics, and we know they're fat tails. You remove half, you remove this, you find fat tails. It's very robust. Now, that's a way to approach the process by saying, this is a scientific result that is fat-tailed, and the same scientific result tells you, right, that your methods of trying to look for the mean don't work, okay? because it's what we call the dog being wagged by the tail. Okay, so because it's all the information is all in the tail, and you don't see the tail. So when we made that statement, that we had a fight with Ioannidis. He said, "Oh, let's wait for scientific results to come before we take action on a pandemic." He said, "Yeah, let's wait for a car accident before we put the seatbelt on." I mean, this is the same kind of statement. So the paper, and I think I sent you a copy of that paper because I did the graphs with Mathematica, right? And so it was, and I like the rest. I'm not as good as Diego here in the room with Mathematica, but I'm one day I'll get close to Diego. All right. So with the graphs anyway. So I did the graphs by showing an example of if I have a log normal distribution, not even a fat tail distribution, okay, with a high variance log normal distribution, that you can have 95% of observations below the mean.
Okay.
So how can you make a prediction? You're going to be 95% wrong, all right, if you get the mean right. You see, so, and the second point, which is in dynamics of things, is that in a dynamic process, in other words, where we have the feedback from people informed of decisions, is that you say the predictions are either self-canceling or self-fulfilling. Yeah, so in this case, they were largely self-canceling, because it's like if you predict a terrorist attack, it won't happen, right? It's self-canceling. But in the case of people had caution, and it's self-canceled. But however, I'm going to say one thing about the models used, is that I saw you and Diego and your son make these cellular automata models that were vastly more robust. So in one afternoon, you guys nailed the model, or trying to do these things, vastly more robust than everything they had in academia. So
I would say more robust. I would say more revealing, at least the things particularly Christopher worked on. The main thing was that you could tell you couldn't tell. That is,
so there, hence, I guess the subject of today, which is the computational irreducibility.
yes. Well, but I think in that case, see, the way I see the pandemic, there are some sort of signs of sort of computational irreducibility in modeling, but there's an awful lot of just science we don't know. And, I think that the problem is people assume you know some science. And oops,
No. I just have to pick up pick up a call. Urgent. One sec.
Yeah,
okay.
no problem. Mute yourself. Yeah. Let's see.
Do you have a reference for the cellular automata stuff you're talking about? That you
Well, I think that was Christopher wrote some stuff. If you look on christopherwolfram.com.
I'll put it on Zoom chat right now.
There is a lively conversation happening in Zoom chat.
Yes. Well, so let's see who would like to. I feel like it would be great to open up this conversation. Who has a good question or comment? Okay, James has one. All right, let's start off with James, and then we'll go to other people as we can.
Well, I think a few days ago.
Let's wait for Nassim to come back. Unless
sure, yeah.
Hello again. Okay, we're sort of opening this up to the audience here. So I think we had should we finish this thought, and then we had some comments and questions from people.
Great. I would like to put just a little structure, because so just for myself, so I don't drown. Okay, that you came with the approach that there is a formal way to do science. Okay, that is similar to physics, the way physics was done, and why it's properly done in physics and gave results. That maybe not be that, but never beautiful results somewhere. And I was talking about the exception as well as you did, and why some fields are allergic to such approach. Mm-hmm. Economics is not. Economics has physics envy, they say, whereas the other one. So could they be a different every field, and like engineering, every field has its own properties.
Yes.
Or it could be something general. That's one. And my claim is that when you do statistical things, the general is very different from the particulars, whereas in physics, the general is not different from particulars. Okay.
Well, right. I mean, the question is repeatability, and the problem in medicine is a fundamentally non-repeatable field. I mean, as an experimental field, because all people are different, you know, when you take X number of milligrams of steroids or something, it will do something different from when somebody else, just because of what they ate or what exercise they took or whatever else. It is deeply non-repeatable. Whereas physics, every electron, for reasons that we think we're beginning to understand, every electron is actually the same, whereas humans are all different. And I mean, that's a major sort of dividing line, I would say, between those fields. It's to have something where you now having noticed that, you can then say there can't be any theory in medicine. There can't be any kind of chain of consequences that you can draw about, you know, this chemical causes this. And so what you have to do is just say, well, let's just do the clinical trial and see what happens. And, you know, I think, I mean, I mean, the thing to me that is surprising is, you know, historically, you know, pre-Copernicus, I think people probably generally thought, if I can't figure it out with my own common sense, that isn't true. Whereas Copernicus was sort of the dividing line where, you know, Copernicus said, look, you know, the Earth is going around the sun, even though we can't tell that the Earth is going around the sun, but the science shows that the Earth is going around the sun. And then, you know, 400 years later, 500 years later, you know, we built this giant tower where as soon as somebody says science shows X, people say, oh, that must be true then. And I think that's and, you know, I think what you're saying is, you know, but there's a, you know, statistics provides a veneer of science in an even worse way than some other kinds of sort of scientific predictions work. I mean, you know, as soon as you say statistically, there is this number, 3.72, and, you know, that sounds very convincing and very scientific. And, you know, then people base a lot of stuff on it. And I think you're pointing out that basing stuff on statistical results is even more hopeless than basing stuff on
No, go ahead.
No, I mean, but basing stuff on kind of these cases where you can do theory. And yeah, I mean, it's you know, I think the blind assumption that science knows what it's doing in the modern world is kind of, it's kind of bizarre to begin with, but it's particularly doomed when the science is merely a veneer of science provided by putting numbers into statistics. At least that's my point of view.
Okay, I would say something. You know, I agree that with you, but I'll say one thing is that what we see is coming from statistics is by people who are using cookie cutter type methods in statistics. So one, you have statistical errors, and that has been my specialty. When I was a trader, that was it. It's mispricing because people were using the wrong formula. Otherwise, I had no business, all right? Without Black-Scholes, I would have never had a business, you see. These people, thanks to science, okay, I had a business. If there was no science, I would have never had a business, all right? Because, and the second one, and the second statement that I want to make is, there exists a very, very, very rigorous way to work with statistics. Okay, but it requires a little more, not relying on these metrics. Okay, taking metrics and stuff like that. See, it requires, because metrics can be gamed, and there is a way to deal with. I call it the probabilistic approach to problems, not the statistical approach. Why use probability? Because probability is more general and doesn't have cookie cutter formulas.
Well, you're saying that basically, if you deal with the whole probability distribution and you look at what happens to the whole probability distribution, you can conclude things.
Or not just
look at it.
the whole probability ensemble, the concept of probability.
Okay.
You see, the whole methods, probabilistic methods. A probability distribution is a simple subset of the ensemble probabilities. And there are also things, and I think there's a person in the room here, Trishank, who argues a lot about meta problems, that how can probability, and we realize the probability distribution cannot tell you what probability distribution it's coming from. That was the first paper I ever wrote. It's called On the Problem of Not Observing Probability Distribution. You don't observe it. So, and what methodology do you need? Okay, and then I said, okay, you can start, you can have a hierarchy of distributions. Mm-hmm. That if I've observed a tail of a large deviation, I can rule out Gaussian. Okay, so it is very similar to Popperian falsification. I can rule out that this thing is degenerate. Degenerate means no distribution. If things moving, and okay, if I see something 10 sigma events, it's much more likely that the distribution is not Gaussian. It's 10 to the 100 times more likely the distribution not Gaussian, right? Yep. Than it being a 10 to the 10 an event of such low probability in a Gaussian. Okay, so you can rank them and rule out what it can be, and also use some scientific theories to rule out that human height is fat-tailed. Because if human height were fat-tailed, okay, you'd have most people have to have a mother, so you have to have a womb. That's another. Human height being fat-tailed means once in a while you observe someone who's 1,000 kilometers tall. Okay, right. So this we can rule out on scientific grounds, based on the way humans are built and the way they scale and all of that. So you can rule out. So you can put structure into distributions. So the idea is, if you're going to use probability distributions, use it right. But the problem is they waste their time on details of things. And then the other thing is, do not go to conclude this section. In physics, you can go from general to the particular and from particular to the general seamlessly. In medicine, you go from the particular to the general, but you cannot go back from the general to the particular that easily. And that's a mistake people make in evidence-based science.
Yes. Yeah, one of the most shocking functions that we've added recently is this function called learn distribution, which is a machine learning-based function that, given data like a bunch of pictures of cats and dogs, will try and learn the distribution of pictures. It's a very weird function, and the extent to which it works, and it works okay, is kind of interesting, because the extent to which it works is a reflection of what are the typical distributions of things that exist in the world. In other words, what are the distribution of distributions, so to speak. Anyway, I'm just curious, just a general knowledge type thing about doctors. I've observed the following thing. I'm curious whether you've observed the same thing or different things and so on, which is, about probability estimates by doctors. So if you deal with a young doctor, you have some symptoms, there are a bunch of possible diseases. Young doctors tend to overestimate rare diseases. Old doctors tend to overestimate common diseases. That's my observation, at least. I don't know whether, and the reason I assume is because, in medical school, it's a question of a priori probabilities. In medical school, you're presented with all these weird cases of all these weird things that, well, you should see at least one example of somebody who has this weird disease. Whereas if you've been practicing medicine for 50 years, most people who show up have the common diseases, so to speak. And so you have a tendency to kind of overestimate the probability of common disease. I don't know whether you've observed the same thing or you have.
I was a victim of that.
Okay.
I was a victim of that. I was 30 in my 30s, and I had throat cancer, and I wasn't smoking. And all doctors say, well, you're too young to have throat cancer, and you should stop shouting. And I was a pit trader, where you shout a lot. So they say you have a singer's nodule. That's, they ruled it out because I was the exception. But a young person not having this experience, I wasn't smoking and I had throat cancer.
Okay, so that's it.
For them, it's not. I mean, they rule out completely. I mean, forget about it. And then it turned out to be throat. Then I had an operation with a person who removes the nodules of singers, opera singers, and it turned out to be a tumor.
And what was the probability? Did you, I mean, did you look up the clinical trials?
I looked at it. The distribution of people younger than 60 having who smoke, even if you smoke, it takes a long time to build, is tiny. But I mean, we live. I mean, you're an exception. We're each an exception in our own way. People don't get. I mean, that's why there's such thing as identity, right? See, and the way, I mean, you recognize me in the street, all right? And there's 7 billion people, all right? You can recognize, and I recognize you, and recognize Matthew, Roman, Enrique, Mads, James. You see the idea. So the point, the statistics is actually much simpler if you only use it on things where it works and never outside.
Yeah.
The problem is people misusing it, particularly psychology. I mean, when they do a noise versus signal, they mistake the signal for noise. Wrong probability distribution. You see?
Yeah, it's right. It's well. Let's see. We should rather than discussing that further, maybe we should take some comments. James, I think you had something to say.
Sure. Well, many of us are interested in the parallel study of economics and physics. As part of why I'm guessing we're having this conversation. So, Dr. Taleb, I think many of us would be interested in hearing maybe your remarks or your comments on these theories of non-ergodicity that Peters and Gell-Mann have been writing about, because I think it could be a nice leeway into thinking about physics and economics.
Okay, to go back to what we're talking about with to put it in Stephen's frame, he was talking about a framework, okay, of averages, okay, and the idea of ergodicity is never cross a river if it's 4 feet deep on average, okay. Well, if you remember last time I was talking about a grandmother, and so the idea of using averages and stuff like that. So to do science, you got to be able to work with averages. So sometimes they misuse it. And the central problem is that you mistake a vertical average for a time average. And let me explain it very simply. And that's an error that psychologists made like big time. If I take 100 gamblers, I send them to the casino, okay, and each for 1 day, okay, come back, I get the average expected return from a casino, and the law of large numbers works beautifully. You tell them gamble for 8 hours, all right, or whatever you lose your money, and come back, okay, with your P&L, all right. So you can figure out the return you can get from a casino for a certain number of bets. The works beautifully because we built casinos because we know probability. That's another one where science would be, but the rest of the world doesn't work that way. Now, if I send one single trader, okay, one single person to the casino for 100 days, okay, have complete different picture, even if there's a positive expected return. So to give you the example I give in Skin in the Game is if on day 28, let's say that I have 100 indexed by 1 to 100, and number 28 goes bankrupt. Number 29 is not affected. You're taking the arithmetic average. So you add a zero doesn't impact on arithmetic average much by 1 over n. Whereas if I take a sequence of traders going to the casino, and if I on day 28, sequence of single person going to the casino dies, then it doesn't get it, all right? So then you can't, because you're taking the different, it's a complete different process, different mathematics. And for the arithmetic average to match the continuous compounded thing, you must bet in log size. Okay, so let me give, for those who are not into trading, a very simple example. All right, people come to America and talk about inequality, and then they write paper on inequality to do things. And there's a French guy who wrote a big book on inequality. He doesn't seem to know much of anything. All right, his name is Piketty. Okay, talking about inequality. You don't realize that to do inequality right, you got to take every person throughout her or his life, rather than take a static inequality. When people say inequality is increasing, there was an article in the New York Times saying inequality is increasing. All right, so they said, look, in 1980 it was this way, 2000, they're not the same people at the top. So what happened is that people don't know that the more ergodic measure is to say how many Americans will spend at least a year in the top 1%, and so effectively 15% of Americans or 12%. How many Americans will spend at least a year in the top 10%, 60% of Americans. Compare that to Europe that has a flatter structure, okay, it's very different. So it's like taking a Markov chain and make sure that there are no absorbing barrier, no absorbing probabilities, no unit 1 or 0 probabilities in a Markov chain. So that's the problem with not looking at dynamics for inequality. It's exactly the same problem as risk management. You see. So for example, when people say, "Oh, it's a fair bet," and people are stupid, it's a good bet, 55-45. Like in Richard Thaler's, I had a Twitter fight with him and started by, it's irrational to not take that bet. Well, the problem is you got to look at, if you keep taking that bet all your life, unless you follow a specific policy of Kelly criterion, for example, which has logs incidentally, you're going to go bankrupt. Even if you have fair odds, because you cannot survive. You're not taking arithmetic vertical average. You're taking, so you got to take a strategy that compounds the return. This is one example of things that in economics that practitioners know, and to tell you that Richard Thaler, among his accomplishments, I think his central one has been that he found a disease called mental accounting that says the following. If you go to a casino and increase your betting with money won from the casino, it's called house's money. All right, you're not irrational because it's the same dollars. Okay, you're committing the fault of mental accounting. Whereas, in fact, the only way to survive is if you treat that money you got from the casino as different money. So you're more aggressive with the house's money than you are with your initial endowment. For example, so there are a lot of mistakes made in psychology, particularly when psychology meets economics, the things blow up. So when you take that's in Skin in the Game, I explained it at length, and what I call the what is it, the risk taking, the whatever, something about the. I thought it was a nice.
It might be useful for people. The sort of physicalized version of what you're saying has to do with time averages versus ensemble averages.
There you go. There you go. Physicists know that because they have ergodicity theories, and economists don't make the mistake when they deal with stochastic processes, because they want to make sure there's no absorption, but they make the mistake in psychology of economics, and a lot of economics feel like inequality, because what concerns you is at birth, what chance do you have, okay, not taking a snapshot of society when it's dynamic, for example.
Right. I mean, actually, I didn't know this thing you said about inequality as a function of time. That's an interesting statement. I mean, the time average. So what do you think is a good measure? You can take, I don't know, let's say you take the Gini index or something, and you take one of these, which is what is the correct time average version? What is the correct time version of that kind of measure?
Two things. I wrote a paper on the Gini index by showing it's bullshit because it increases over time. Because if I take Europe, it would have a higher Gini than the average countries. Okay. So it is super additive. Okay, that's one problem with the Gini. So I wrote a paper on it that people didn't notice, but that's life. Okay. On
that's because there's some countries. You're saying that the countries, when you take the aggregate of all the countries.
Yeah.
And wait a minute, you take the aggregate of all the people, or you take the aggregate of
all the people in a country. Yeah, say the average Gini in Europe is, the weighted average Gini is say 0.3. You do all of Europe, it's going to be 0.2.
By computing all of Europe by taking the Ginis of countries, or by taking the individual people?
Individual Ginis, individual Ginis.
What's that? The
individual Ginis. If you take the individual Gini of, say, two countries are equal in size.
Yes.
okay, the Gini of the population will be higher than the average Gini of the two populations.
What is the formula actually for the given a probability distribution P of X? What is the formula for the Gini? I don't know it offhand, but
you can get it. That was 7 years ago. I wrote that paper, and also I showed that if I have a stochastic process, all right, generating a Gini, that if I have 1,000 observation and then 10,000 observation, and you know what I did then? What I did is I ran in Monte Carlo on Mathematica for an entire week to see if I go to you know, if I have a trillion, a sample of a trillion, what would be the expected Gini?
right.
And it would keep going up with the Gini would keep going up with sorry.
So that's kind of crazy. But I'm just curious from a pure mathematical point of view. This observation that people go up and down in their quantile.
That's the second point. That's the second point. So you got to take a Markov chain approach to things by saying, instead of measuring the Gini of the population, a snapshot, okay, and see how it moves, because they're not the same people are going to be at the top 1% year after year. Okay, what you must do is find a metric that takes an individual, okay, today, and see, or based on experience, or someone 20 years ago, 30 years ago, all right, and see how many times on average they spend in every state. To give you a very simple idea, and this was Larry Summers, actually, although I had a little run-in with him over misuse of math in economics. He actually has a good metric. He took the Forbes 1980 and took the Forbes 2010 or 82 2012, and then 30 years later he showed it's not the same people.
Of course it's not. Most of them have died.
It's not. No, the same families. All right. Okay. Whereas you take Italy, it's very interesting. You take the Gini of 1540 in Florence, and you take today is the same last names.
Wow.
Okay. So it's quite interesting. In France, I mean, that tells you something about social mobility. They have a flatter.
Right. So I'm curious, and people talk about social mobility and their various measures of that and so on. But the thing you're describing is, there is what you're describing is an effective quantile social mobility. And I'm curious how you can quantify that thing.
I think the best thing is someone asked me the same question. I said the best heuristic is, say, the probability of a hotshot to exit the club. All right. So you take Forbes 500 as a club, see how fast it is to exit it. And Russia, admirably, people say, "Oh, look at these." There's
some very unfortunate ways to exit it in Russia, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, there are a lot of ways, but the Russians been exiting it. I mean, replaced by new guys all the time. So that's the interesting thing in Russia. In the United States, also, some people exit the club. All you need is another Nasdaq collapse, and it'll be entertaining. Okay. Or measures by the government to cut the big because the inequality now is coming from tech firms. So and you see, so basically it is not so much by looking at opportunity, how people rise, because it's a zero sum. The rank is zero sum by definition, is how people fall.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So reallocation you have.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember an old trader telling me in 1987, when there was a crash, he told me, "Look, kiddo," I said, "What?" He said, "Crashes, they're good for society." I told him why. He said, "They do a reallocation. Even socialists don't know how to do it that way." The crashes cause reallocation, right, of money, redistribution.
But so I'm curious, if you look at the Italian setup versus, I mean, can you see from the behavior of markets, for example, there have been crashes in Italy, there have been crashes in lots of countries.
Yeah, no, but they hold on to privileges because it's built into society. I think the UK has a dual system where you have a bunch of people who hold to agrarian land, something like this, and they got the technologists and immigrants like here who become the billionaires. But traditionally, it was much more of a static society in UK before technological.
Sure.
But there've been papers on social mobility in Europe and Italy and stuff like that. But nobody thought of doing a dynamic Gini rather than static Gini.
So which country wins if you look for maximum?
US by far.
What's number two?
I would say Russia. Russia, because they have, they may not have a lot of mobility from the bottom to the top like the US, but they have mobility from the top to the whatever bottom you may define, whether it's a jail cell, a cemetery, or just becoming poor again.
Right.
How fortunes are undone, okay, is something central.
So let's see. Sataras had his hand up here.
Yes, hello from me as well. I wanted to make a question about the ecodicity and the non-ecodicity in the casino, for example, behavior. Was this the case that, for example, in the casino, we have different players, okay? So one would expect that what breaks the ecodicity is the possibility for choice of the individual player. For example, if instead of looking at the roulette, we were looking at the slot machines, then if 100 people played, so to speak, or the same person played for 100 days, the same machine, we wouldn't expect something different to happen.
No, you would, because you can, okay, I don't know if you're setting it up to make slow bets, but for the equivalent variance, okay, it's neutral to whatever lumpy or not distribution, whether lumpy or it's lumpy or not.
No, it's not about this. It's about, for example, the 100 results will either be given the same day for 100 people, or if the same person played 100 times, progressively.
You can go bust playing slot machines.
Sorry?
You can go bankrupt playing slot machine, run out of money.
Yes, that's why I said, for example, each player playing once, while in the roulette, you have the choice to what you choose when you stop. And again, in the slot machine as well, if you put the choice inside, where will I stop? It also comes.
Should be the same. It should be the same, because you play once, but then you play, it's
multiple times. Yes, this is different from my hypothesis.
It's because you put only a coin in the thing, but you could put a lot of, it's sort of invariant.
Yes, exactly.
You're saying because you're slicing the bet in smaller, you're playing, in fact, Kelly, when you play slot machine, because you're forced to slice every bet to be a coin, no?
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yes.
Okay, yeah, so then your variance is not the same as the other one.
No, if you put...
You have to make bets of the same variance. You see the idea?
Yes.
But you're correct. Effectively, the slot machine forces you to not go bankrupt because you're going to bet too slowly, only $1. And say you win 100, you can only put one back. You can't put the whole 100.
Yes, of course. But my question was more towards the implication of choice and the reason why ecodicity breaks. For example, is it because in economics we consider the individual itself as fundamentally non-ergodic, or because we have a system of
it's not. Let's not use go too much into ergodicity, but just saying that some situation need to be analyzed in as Stephen said, time average, and some other situation needs to be analyzed as vertical average. Okay, but I know from my experience in trading is that people who look at and in my anecdote at trading as only a vertical average, okay, go bust. Like, for example, if you play Russian roulette, if someone tells you 80% of doctors think Russian roulette is harmless, or which probably would be correct, right? It's a different statement from, you have 80% chance of making money, 20% chance of dying. And if you played Russian roulette repeatedly, okay, you will not be there to enjoy the winning, you see? So, and with probability 1, you're going to go bust, okay? It doesn't take long. So that's the idea of to worry about ruin applied to a lot of things. And this is where I was telling you in the beginning, risk management supersedes ruin, supersedes science. in the sense that when you're uncertain, you want to avoid ruin situations, okay? So your time average, okay, isn't your time isn't clipped by absorption.
Well, right. But by the way, it's worth pointing out that the whole idea of ergodicity, physics can get away with ergodicity assumptions in a bunch of cases to do with thermal equilibrium, but it is actually, ergodicity is not as convincing even in physics. I mean, ergodicity was a thing that was introduced around 100 years ago as a nice mathematical mechanism, but it isn't, it's not as successful. It's not like ergodicity is proved by physics. There are certain mathematical systems in dynamical systems theory where you can prove ergodicity, but it's usually very boring ergodicity. It's, this idea that you can always exchange time averages for ensemble averages is actually rarely true. So the fact that it's definitively not true when you have some absorbing barrier, when you have, the possibility of bankruptcy or something, that's an extreme case. But it's still, it's an interesting extreme case, more extreme than most of the cases in physics. But it's still not true in plenty of physics.
I'm going to give you an anecdote. Actually, it's not an anecdote. It's a science. This is a statistical thing. All right. In 1998, a fund called Long-Term Capital Management.
Yes, I know.
Only a very short-term life went bust, and it's really the poster child of.
You should tell the story of long-term capital management.
Okay, so long-term capital started a firm, and two of their members got the Nobel Prize for the option pricing formula that didn't work. Okay. And I am very, very familiar because I was in that business, okay, and it was people who loved financial theory, and they said they really believed that whatever financial economics and all the techniques they had work in the real world, and my belief was that these guys are called sitting ducks because you can make some money off of them. So, and of course, in 1998 there was a blow up, and we counted something like 52 PhDs in finance or economics, all right, were involved in blow up, okay? So we counted how many financial people with PhD. So there are two kind of traders who blow up because they ignore ruin. They ignore ruin. They give you probability distribution, they ignore ruin, all right? They don't realize they can be ruined. And when you ruin, you don't come back, okay? And it's very strange. Out of we counted how many we call people short vol. We call these people, all right? How many people were short tails out of the 53 financial economists or PhDs in economics or finance who went to Wall Street? Because it was not only the LTCM that blew up. So many other firms blew up. They were the same kind of people. It's the same ecology. They're imitating. Like a crypto firm blows up, you're going to have 4 or 5 blowing up because they do have the same strategy. Okay, so one out of the 53 was not short volatility, tail risk, because they came in and said, "Oh, risk is to be sold. Let's sell the tail." And they hold, oh, this is lottery tickets. They're overpriced. Someone read a book on lottery tickets. Oh, it's overpriced. So let's sell. These are the same. They're not the same as lottery tickets. Okay. So because you have, unbounded stuff, a lot of people are on a trade and stuff. So it's a sucker game. So it is telling as a description of what happened in that science.
Mm-hmm.
I think we did the back. I mentioned in one of the books those numbers. I did back to the envelope. I think by then we had counted 44 by then. Okay. 44 because we followed them. This guy, where's this guy from? And usually Ivy League, Harvard, MIT, Harvard, Yale, so on, and they all blew up. And the same thing repeated itself 2007, 2008. So
it's not a great advertisement for economics PhDs.
It's not for financial economics, for those who go into markets. It's not a very good description. That these guys, the people who were caught were those guys, okay? Because the first thing they do is they go sell the tail, and of course they can't figure out you don't cross the river if it's on average 4 feet deep. They only look at the average. So that mistake of ergodicity and mistake of fat tails was combined in that population. But the same people caused Fannie Mae to blow up. because that's again how they don't understand that if you hit a patch, you hit a patch.
Well, but
And-
so your intuition, I mean, I'm curious about, you think the sort of the absorbing barrier of if you keep going too long, eventually you will, I mean, so what is your, I mean, you've managed to keep doing this trading stuff for a long time without.
Okay. So I've been an option trader. I started 37 years ago. And I'm going to tell you one thing. I saw a population of people disappearing. And they disappear from the book. You don't know what happened. So they don't teach others. In my days, it was like when I talk about why I want to protect medicine's current status as know how rather than know what, techne versus episteme, is because my day, when I started trading, there were two kind of traders. There's the old traders who didn't like formulas. They priced an option organically, with the whims and the relationship between items and stuff like that. And then there was the scientific crowd, the formulas. So what happened is that because there's something called MBA that came about, so people started getting classes in MBA and learning finance from professors. So instead of having a practitioner teach a practitioner, teach a practitioner, teach a practitioner, you had in the old days to be not an option trader or to be a trader, you go work for a trader, you clerk for a trader, you pick her or his brain, and then you become a trader. So you've learned how all these tricks. Now you disrupt it by having the chain of knowledge goes from professor writing papers to professor writing papers to professor, with students getting in between without any feedback from reality. And that chain, you don't want to protect medicine from getting that, because still today doctors are learning from doctors. You see, so you want to. It works. Maybe in the absence of a general theory, it works. In finance, all right, things are worse. I mean, I wrote the Black Swan right before the crisis of 2008, explaining that these guys don't know how to price tail risk. Right? Today, exposure to tail risk is bigger than it was 2008. Systems still don't handle this. Still use something called the value at risk. Right? And they still use all the crap that was there still being used. Why? Because you don't have learning. You don't have a skin in the game.
But
yeah.
So if you look at the hedge funds that exist, I don't know how many, 1,500 or so hedge funds, whatever the number is, I don't know if that's the right number. When they're, how many of them, I mean, you're talking about ones who...
No. Hedge funds are okay, because hedge funds have skin in the game. You see, it's financial institutions that don't have skin in the game.
But you mean the fact that they have skin in the game causes them to take a different approach? They're still doing these computations.
Okay, so it's both ways, but I feel safer today that risk was transferred to hedge funds. You see, because the guys at Fannie Mae will never learn.
Yeah.
Bailed out by the taxpayer, they'll never learn. The guys at JP Morgan will never learn. The guys that, knowing they can be bailed out by the taxpayer, whether they were or not. So the big financial institutions don't have the same rigor as hedge funds. And we were saved, and hedge fund, it didn't come naturally. It came because of the Volcker rule. Thanks to probably someone who's saved this country twice, Paul Volcker, right? And that Volcker rule is a beautiful thing because it prevented banks from trading. So the money went to hedge fund, and about every year, about 2,000-3,000 hedge funds fail, and not one of them makes a newspaper.
Okay, so your point is it's a natural selection type
phenomenon. Yeah, exactly. Natural selection, and also because owners of hedge fund have to put a large chunk of their net worth in a hedge fund. Someone may tell me LTCM, they have their money in a fund, okay? But I would say that it's necessary but not sufficient.
Fair enough.
Okay, and necessary because once you're wiped out, you're wiped out. You see, it's a different type of wiping out. Let me give you the representation I give to simplify the point in skin in the game. Okay, restaurants have skin in the game in the sense that it's your credit card that counts. Okay, but there are prizes. So whatever system, but there is a peer review system for restaurants. where they have awards and
Sure.
it's a peer review system, and journalists and stuff like that. So there are two mechanisms. And a friend, a former trader who decided to lose his money slowly in a restaurant business, reported that he said, you have all these prices, and they don't make it to the gala dinner. You see. They don't make it to the gala dinner. Just to tell you, the mechanism of peer review is not as good a mechanism as survival, organic survival. And the plumber is not paid by a committee of plumbers observing, they're paid by himself. So
these are arguments for capitalism, so to speak. I mean, these are, I mean, as opposed to kind of the elite decides who's a good restaurant, who isn't. It's kind of
the market decides. Yeah, it's an argument for capitalism, smart form of capitalism, but also it's an argument against academia, because basically it's a peer review mechanism, and we're not sure that peers are good without some kind of either adult supervision or market.
Sure. No, that's I think we probably both, I suspect, agree that the sort of the peer review system of academia is a hopeless kind of.
It's hopeless, but I played it. To be able to say hopeless, right, I had to write 75 scholarly papers.
Okay.
I started only 12 years ago. I wrote 75 papers, published them in whatever journal you want. I mean, I picked, no, but I say, okay, in medicine, I'd rather have the paper peer reviewed. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Right, I treat it that way because that way, there's someone checked something, all right, as just like there was a checking of that stuff by some specialists. That's the way I view it, no more. Where they think it is sufficient.
Right. Well, that's again, it's a belief in the kind of the perfection of science, so to speak. People believe there is this thing called science that operates in certain ways that gives 3.72 as a result. It's peer reviewed, therefore that's the way the world is, and we can predict based on that. And this is, it's kind of crazy in my view. I mean, yeah, interesting. Well, let's see. We had some other. Let's see. I think Raphael had his hand up. Is Raphael still?
Yeah. I had a quick question about the last conversation about the law of one price and sort of these. There's various interpretations in terms of curvature and gauge symmetry. The one thing I was trying to figure out is in economics, when you say the law of one price, is that a syntactic thing? And what I mean by that is it's just another way of accounting for what is actually a definitive value. Whereas in physics, right, if you have a gauge symmetry, it's almost like the formula can't detect the difference. But in reality, there could be a difference. It's just at the level of, say, like the Schrodinger equation, the phase doesn't actually change the observable result. But in the law of one price, is it that it's actually like one sort of
No. Okay, the law. Okay, yeah. It's not a law. Okay, whatever economists call law, the Occam's law, this law, they're not laws. Law of diminishing return, they're not laws, but they're interesting, and you use them as a vague guideline. All right. So, but let me when I talk about the law of one price. Okay. If the price of Tesla is different in Arkansas than it is in California, and if it's okay, but it's only $1,000, nobody cares. But if it's one order of magnitude different, then only idiots would buy it in Arkansas. The rest would, you get the idea. You go drive to California, pick it up, and have a good day. So this is what I mean by law of one price. It's quite central in seeing how things should be in the world, but it requires some kind of market structure, no transaction costs, and or no barriers to commerce and stuff like that may exist. You may be forced to buy your car in Brazil if you live in Brazil. All right, you can't really import cars easily, so therefore it doesn't hold. You see, so you got to realize when things hold. So this is why I don't like the notion of law. Law as much by using got to be some other word, because they tried to imitate physicists and they thought they were doing very well, you see, so they use the vocabulary, the methods, and everything, and people thought it was a law. It's not a law. So for me, it's arbitrage. When I think about arbitrage, and I did all form of arbitrage, and it's always humbling to do arbitrage because you think that in arbitrage that two items very similar cannot diverge too much in price. You think that can happen, and no, you have all kind of crazy things happening, and because of ergodicity, you may go bankrupt on a good trade. And I've seen someone go bankrupt on excellent trade. Like you can convert a put into a call, all right, where you can convert it. It's called convert whatever. And but the problem is a put plus underlying is called a call minus is equal to a call minus short underlying. Okay, and the problem is he converted it, so there was a rally, and you're losing money on the underlying that you have to pay cash for. And the call is a book entry, that's making money, but he couldn't cash it out. Okay, and so the person was insolvent because it had the right trade, and this happens at times of tight liquidity. So whenever you think in terms of arbitrage, you got to look at exceptions of where it doesn't work, like this law of one price. So there's not a law. It could be a tendency for things to go in the same direction, and it applies beautifully to currencies. Like when currencies are in the same economic zone, you don't have a lot of divergence in price, but you still have enough for someone to make a living arbitraging the two.
What do you mean arbitraging between different, cycles of currencies, for example?
Or for example, let's take a very simple. I talk about Turkey. All right, so someone here from Lebanon, they were buying their medication from France, not from Turkey. You can get the same thing at a fifth of the price in Turkey. All right, so the passive arbitrage is instead of buying from France, you buy from Turkey, and it's a lot cheaper. Active arbitrage is you go buy it in Turkey, package it, as in a way to become French, because they are techniques, and then sell it as French.
Mm-hmm.
And the Italians do that all the time. So long as something's made in Italy, if some proportion is made in Italy, so they make the thing in China.
Mm-hmm.
And they put the made in Italy label on it. And for a while, they're arbitraging the difference in labor between Italy and China for a given quality of work, because it's the same quality actually. Okay, so this is what I call arbitrage, and you have convergence as you have more globalization. You cannot have too much divergence in prices.
So is price something that's like, I guess it was more of a epistemological question. It was more like, is price something that like is intrinsic to the item, or is it something that's like constantly like
the market decides, but value,
okay.
like a lot of people like say Bitcoin for me is valued at 0, but the price is 34. And a lot of people don't get it, say, well, sell it to me for 0. I'll pay 1,000 for it. I say, no, you idiot, if I want to short it, I sell it 34. You see, but I value it at, so you have your valuation and you have the price. They're two different items. Okay, they're two different items, and but if you have a good valuation in the long run, prices should converge to it. Like for a long time, I thought that these CDOs were worth 0, all right, not 100, okay, and of course they were going for 100, and I was wrong, and then they end up being worth 0, all right. So that's not, so they have valuation and you have price. Some options I see now trading for 10 cents are to me worth $2. Okay, that's valuation. And that you don't have in physics, okay?
Which part do you not have in physics?
Difference between price and valuation. So each field must have its own rules, you see, of what we call science, not science.
Sure.
And economics was completely destroyed by trying to imitate physics.
Sure. No, this look, it's what I find interesting, listening to you talk about puts and calls and this and that and the other. It's a somewhat different framework for thinking about things than one is used to from a field like physics. It's a different, many fields have different ways of thinking. Sometimes those ways of thinking produce useful results. Sometimes it's kind of hopeless. Sometimes they produce useful results, in their own framework, but nobody else cares about it. But let's see. I think we had a couple more questions, and then probably we should wrap up soon. But
yeah, I have to be in a restaurant at 7 p.m.
Okay. All right. Okay. Quick. So Assad and then Roman, and then we should wrap up.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, I was really interested in, you said the easiest decision you can make is when you have uncertainty to say no. And I'm interested in seeing your opinion on something like where you can't say no. Like, for example, talking about climate change and the release of CO2.
Oh yeah, no. Climate change. For 10 years, and then we ended up writing a paper, a statement, me, Yanir, and the friends of Yanir, and we got heat from both sides. And my point is, we don't. The less we understand the world, the less risks we should take with things that are no dumping in large quantities in the atmosphere. Plus, there's a notion of nonlinearity. Like if I jump 10 meters, I'm harmed more than 10 times than if I jump 1 meter. So if there's a nonlinearity in dose response, okay, there's always some kind of S curve and can be complex. So whatever it is, I'm saying we don't understand. These models, climate models, right? The more uncertain we are about these climate models, the less we should pollute, okay, or spread across pollutants. So we got heat from everyone. All right, say, oh, you're saying our models are wrong, all right? And then the other guy's saying, oh, you want us to, you go with the World Economic Forum. So on both sides we got heat. You see?
I mean, they are because.
But it's an easy decision with the climate. It's an easy decision. I go with the paranoid.
What do you think of when they say, well, in 50 years, temperature is going to increase 3 degrees.
I have no idea.
These statements are based on a mean of 20 models.
All these statements, I take the variance between models as better indication of what to do. You see, it's very simple. Like Warren Buffett says no 1,000 times for every time he says yes. All right. He said, I don't have to invest there. All right. I don't have. There are other things to do. All right. So you don't have to use fossil fuels. There's other things to do. Okay. Spread. Okay. You don't. I don't know. And people say, I have uncertainty about whether it's good or not for the climate. All right. But I don't want to take that risk because there's uncertainty. The more uncertainty, and we actually modeled it. So this is an interesting thing about probability is you can use probability models because there's one advantage. Even in France, probability adds up to 1. You see? So you know that you have a structure of a probabilistic model. You can make decision or have some insights about things.
Thank you.
Oh, interesting. Okay, Roman, last.
All right. So with basically there's the rise of a lot of models recently, which allow people to basically predict their investments in some way, is through basically computer tools that let them just make it a lot easier to see the market and that sort of thing, and even some that are starting to forecast. With those, do you think in the future, is that going to be a positive change because it's basically getting more people to act rationally, or a negative change because it's making people not use common sense? I could see it going either way.
We haven't discussed undecidability and stuff like that, but there's a problem when you have recursion, where I know that you know, and that you know that I know.
Yeah.
Model other people will, then the market changes and stuff. And the only successful use of automated models I've seen is in doing short-term brokerage. When I was a pit trader, how do you make money in a pit trader? You make money being stupid, all right, and buying on the bid, selling on the offer, and going home flat. That's how the rule is, all right? So if you buy on the bid, sorry?
I don't know what those terms mean. What do those terms mean?
Okay, buying on the bid, it's like I'm a car dealer. I buy for 10,000 and sell for 12, right? And it's worth 11,000 in my mind. I have that edge, all right? So that's what a market maker does, all right? So of course, you're going to be wrong with valuation, but it washes out if you buy and sell a lot. So firms like Renaissance, they do that with an industrial thing, and instead of dimension 2, they do it in n dimension. So they spot things and they keep doing buying and selling all the time, 100,000 times a day sometimes. So they were my clients, and when I was still a bank market maker, and they would come in and they want 96 million of yen Aussie currency, right? You give them a quote, and then they come back, they want the equivalent of in euro of Swiss. So I see that they're doing pairs, you see, they're buying here, selling here. So in other words, the law of one price, they're trying
Yeah.
to arbitrage.
It's
right?
yeah.
More
You
than-
can
and
never
that's
actually
the point.
have a law of one price. It's a law of generally close-ish prices unless something weird happens.
Close framework of how things should trade, and there's divergence of one, so they buy it. Okay, so but a market maker provides liquidity. They provide systemic liquidity. A market maker stands up and tells you, I buy the share for 10,000 and I sell for 12,000. All right. Then you sell them a lot. Now I buy for 9,000, sell for 11,000. So market makers tend to make money, in that way. All right. And sometimes the market moves either caught short or long. So you have a bad month, but the rest of the time you're okay. So that's pretty much this is why people used to pay $15 million at a time to become market maker on the American Stock Exchange, to become a specialist. So you pay $15 million to get that edge, what's called order flow, all right? So what I've seen people successfully do is transform that approach with order flow to make it electronic, and that's Renaissance. That's the job of Renaissance. Okay, that's most of what they did, and other firms like that. They don't have a huge model of the world and stuff. They have some. Okay, they may overlay it with some view here and there, but it washes out under the frequency of transactions.
Yeah.
See, so if you're wrong and your prices shouldn't be 11 but 10 and a half, all right, or 10, you still have enough of an edge. It doesn't matter much. So this is what I did as an option market maker. I was trading options. I had price, valuation, and I ended up buying and selling, buying and selling, buying and selling. And you inventory, you take the risk of inventory. So you lose sometimes, you make sometimes. And because you lose sometimes, you make a spread wide, so that feeds you. So you can say the edge is somewhere halfway between 10,000 and 12,000, if that's bid and ask. So car dealers make money that way. You see, they buy on a bid, sell you on the ask. All right, and so you can. But I've never seen people have electronic systems. Okay, so I'm being called.
You better disappear.
I got. So we wrap up. So thank you very much for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Great conversation. Thank you.
Yes, and hopefully, I'll pick your brain next time, and hopefully someday on computational irreducibility, because we're using it in the precautionary principle.
All right, I want to hear about that. Okay.
Great.
Another time.
Thank you very much, and have a great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Everyone.